And the Board of Commissioners workshop is called to order at 2:03. Will the Assistant City Clerk please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Douthert?
Present.
Commissioner Hodges?
Here.
Commissioner Oakley?
Here.
Vice Mayor Weinstein?
Here.
Mayor Black?
Present. Before we get started, I just want to say that Sunday night, Pinellas County, Florida, the United States, the world lost a great leader. John Maroney passed away at the young age of 63. He will be missed and was loved by many, and he'll be missed by even more. May he rest in peace. Public comment is now open. Does anyone wish to speak? Public comment is now closed. The first item we have on our agenda is Commissioner Kathy Peters. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you letting me come and give you a legislative update. There's kind of good news and bad news. I would say the bad news is it was a very unproductive session this year. We had a lot of distractions. First, we started with the Hurricane Irma and the expenses that were going to go with that, so we put a lot of energy in how we were going to manage the budget. And then, of course, we had the distraction of the Me Too movement and a lot of sexual harassment claims in the legislature, which also took a lot of attention away from the work that needs to get done. There was a lot of distraction. And then, of course, there was that horrific school shooting, which then consumed the last 3 weeks of session. And so we didn't pass that many bills. Typically, we pass about 230 to 250 bills. And this year, we passed like a handful, like 40, 48 bills. I don't even have the actual number, but it's minimal. And so the good news is we didn't do too much damage to the local governments in the cities. And you know, that's a big issue. And every time I come, every year I talk about the home rule invasion. Most of you know about that. And those of you that are not involved in the League of Cities, I strongly encourage you to get involved in the League of Cities, because this year, and those of you that are, is anyone here involved in League of Cities? No, you are. And mayor is. I know I've seen the mayor up there. So this year was really great. They actually had people going up every single week. And so there was a constant presence of local constituents up in Tallahassee. And I will tell you that makes a huge difference. And it's my belief that you have at least 2 more years of that trying to take away home rule is going to be active. So I think after 2 years it may slow down, but there are several people left in the legislature that is their mission, to eliminate small cities. So please stay on your guard, communicate with the legislature often. You're going to have a lot of new delegation members, so I won't be running for the House of Representatives again, so my seat will be open. You have 3 good candidates that are running. Get to know each one of them. And then whoever ends up getting elected in November, make sure you have an opportunity to meet with them. Make sure they understand your issues and that you have a relationship with that person, that you can pick up the phone and call them when they're in session and they're going to take your call. That is the best advice I can give to any of you, because I do believe for the next 2 years you're going to be fighting to keep home rule. And so I think it's really important for you. The one thing I want to let your residents know is we do have a hurricane tax-free week. So if you're going to buy your hurricane supplies, it may be worth it to wait until June 1st. So from June 1st until June 7th, they will be tax-free. So anything generators $750 or less will be tax-free. Batteries, tarps, flashlights, coolers, all those things that you need to prepare, those will be tax-free. And so it's important to kind of let that out if you want to save a little money. It's important to get prepared, but you might want to save some money when you do it, and do it that first week of June. We also will have a back-to-school tax-free for the families. It's only going to be a 3-day. It'll be in August. I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but there will be a 3-day tax-free. So when you go to buy your kids' sneakers and school supplies, you might want to wait until then, too, and save some money. The other things that we have that happened, so there aren't that many. One was a bill that I've passed, and that's the Pinellas County License Board. Many of you are aware of the stories that came out about the License Board, and that there was maybe some things that weren't transparent, and that they weren't being accountable, and there was innuendos of some other things that were not ethical happening at the License Board. So what we did is we passed a bill to make it, instead of an independent district, now it is a dependent. So it's dependent on the county. So the county now has oversight. They will be responsible for annual audits that they will have to provide to the county to ensure that there's more accountability. All the employees now will be employees of the county, so there won't be the kind of free dealing that went on. That will be reined in, so there'll be more accountability that way. And there's going to be a lot more transparency. And a lot of people said, well, why didn't you just get rid of it? Why do we need another board that collects money that contractors have to go through? And we really talked it out. And what we determined is before the license board was created, we have the 24 cities in the county. And so we had 25 government entities that had different standards for building, contracting, swimming pools, air conditioning, electricity. And so what we found is some weren't up to best practice. Some were very burdensome and hard to get something done. And so many years ago, they decided that if we made just one entity that made the standard and did everything else that goes with it, that we would have a much safer, better quality county. And so we were fearful that if we took it away, we'd go back to 25 different rules and regulations, 25 standards, and it would be difficult to work for the contractors, the electricians, the pool companies, and everything else. But we also might be at risk of not ensuring that every building and everything that is built in this state, in this county, would be up to a high standard. So we did determine to keep the licensing board, and that's really why. The other things that we did pass was the opiate bill. Many of you heard in the news. Really, the only thing I think we heard in the news was that we're going to change it so you can only get 3 days or 7 day supply of painkillers, opiates. There is an exemption that if you have cancer or some other disease that causes significant pain, you would be exempted from that 3 or 7 day limit, and you would still be able to get what you need for quality of life. But where a lot of people are going to have difficulty is when it's post-op. So if you're going to have a major back surgery, you're still going to have to go see your doctor 7 days later, and that can be very difficult for somebody who's post-op. I think the bill still needs some work. I expect there to be tweaks next year. Most of it probably will be with prescribing. The other parts of that bill is the PDMP. It's a prescription management, I forget what the acronym is, so I apologize. But what it is a database. So it was always voluntary. So a doctor could, when they prescribe you opiates, and this really came up from the pill mills, if you remember back in the 90s and early 2000s, the pill mill was a big problem here in Pinellas County. Matter of fact, it originated in Pinellas County. A lot of people didn't know that the pill mill started here and then expanded across the state. And so what they did is they created this PDMP, which is a database that doctors are supposed to voluntarily go on that database and put in. So let's say, Mayor, you got an opiate prescription. Your doctor is supposed to put on that database that you got that prescription on that date. And that way, if you go doctor shopping and 3 days later, not that you would, but just an example, if you went 3 days later to get another prescription filled in another doctor, that doctor should look at the PDMP to see that if you are or not doctor shopping, or if you are not at risk of getting too many opiates, which would cause an addiction. The problem is a lot of people didn't use it. So we're cleansing the data and we're starting over, and now doctors have to use it. And we're also expanding it voluntarily for other states. So when we had the pill mill problem, we had people from Kentucky and Tennessee. We had a pill mill in South Pasadena when I was the mayor, and it was on Shore Drive and Pasadena Avenue, right before the causeway. It was on the corner. And we would see license plates in there from Tennessee, from Kentucky, from Georgia. People would come all the way down to Pinellas County to get their opiate prescriptions filled. And often we would find them dead on the highway before they even got back across the border. And we had lots of problems in our city with just the people that were there and the paraphernalia that was left behind. So I'm happy that that problem has been solved. But that's when we created this PDMP, and that is still the purpose of it. So just so we don't have people again crossing into Florida to be able to get their drugs, people in Kentucky and Tennessee and Georgia will be able to see if they're doctor shopping in Florida. So it's kind of more of an expansive database. I think a lot of other states are going to buy into the same kind of thing. The opiate crisis has now taken 15 to 16 people's lives a day in the state of Florida, but it's really the same across the nation. This truly is a crisis. You're seeing a lot on the news, and you're seeing a lot on the news because it is a huge crisis. And for every pregnant mother that we don't catch, that baby that is born addicted to opiates, the cost to take care of that baby just for the first 2 months is $280,000, just for the first 2 months. And it's additional costs in the medical examiners, it's additional costs for law enforcement, police, fire. I can tell you we don't have enough Narcan to go around. to save the lives of people that have overdosed. My son's a firefighter, and he had a call just the other day with 3 people that overdosed with heroin. And if it's got the carfentanil, they're dying before they get the needle out of their arm. It's that instantaneous. And this is something that's new in the county. I didn't know about it, but they're only packing the bags, 1 bag per truck for Narcan. Well, he had 3 people, and 1 bag can only take care of 1 person. I mean, it doesn't happen often. You go into a building and there's 3 people, but what do you do when they do? So I got to commend all those firefighters because they were able to do it until more supplies came, and they were able to save, at least they were all alive when they took them to the hospital, which is amazing. So if your fire department asks for more Narcan or more money for Narcan, that would be why. So it's a big issue. I think the legislature is taking action. I don't think they're taking enough. In fact, we are only funding mental health and addiction about $3 million less this year than last year. So we have a long way to go. I believe it's a big crisis, and we're just not there yet. And it's really falling on the backs of the local communities to have to take care of it with your police, your fire, the medical examiners, because we're just not dealing with it effectively. So I expect that to go on for the next couple of years, that we'll be tweaking that and trying to find a better solution. Hopefully we'll get more funding, but that's, who knows. The last thing that I want to talk about that happened in session, which consumed the last 3 weeks, and so what I'm going to tell you about is the school safety bill. And I want to tell you what's in it. I'm not here to debate it, but just talk about what's in it. So it's what we've got, it's what we have to deal with now. How are we going to manage that? So what you heard in the news, of course, is that we made long guns the same as short guns. So handguns, you had to wait 3 days to buy them. If you had a concealed weapons permit, you didn't have to wait. So we had all those rules for handguns, but we didn't for long guns. So what we did is we made the long guns the exact same as handguns. So just like handguns, you have to wait 3 days. Just like handguns, you have to have a background check. Just like handguns, if you have a concealed weapons carry, you don't have to wait. Just like handguns, you have to be 21 to buy them. So those are pieces that were in the bill that you heard probably on the news. The other piece you heard on the news is that they wanted to put the Marshall program in the schools in the state of Florida. And the Marshall program came from Polk County. So all the sheriffs in the state were there in these task force meetings to come up with solutions. And many of the solutions came from the sheriff. So Sheriff Grady Judd is the one that came up with the Marshall program. And the reason he brought it up is this is what he has been doing in Polk County for many years. And what he did is he would take teachers or other professionals in the schools. He would put them through 140-hour rigorous training to train them just like a police officer. Once they finished their training, he would deputize them, and then because they were deputies, they could carry a concealed weapon in school, because you're not allowed to have handguns in schools in the state of Florida unless you're law enforcement. So what he did with these teachers is he deputized them. Now, nobody really knew. Families didn't know, parents didn't know, children didn't. Nobody knew that the teachers had concealed weapon on their person, but that's what they've done in Polk County. So Sheriff Grady Judd suggested that that be the Marshall program for the state of Florida. It was very clear from the parents, the students, the school districts around the state that they didn't want teachers with guns. They didn't care about the training, they just did not want teachers with guns. So what we did is we watered down the program. And what they did is they called it the Guardian program. Teachers are not allowed to have guns. So even if a teacher wants to volunteer and go through this training, they can't, not in the state of Florida. Now the Sheriff Grady Judd is still deputizing them. So he's the only school district I know in the state of Florida that has opted to participate in this Guardian Marshall program. But because they said no teachers, what he's doing still is deputizing them, and that makes it legal. So Pinellas County opted out of it. And what the Guardian program does is it says any professional in the school, but not teacher, non-teacher professional, can volunteer. They would have to go through 170 hours of training, more than what the sheriff does. And once they finish that training successfully passed a background check, they would then be able to carry. It would be the same kind of thing. They'd be deputized and they'd be able to carry a gun in the schools. A concealed carry, never can show. And so that's what the Guardian program is. And the only one I know, like I said, there could be some others in North Florida that are participating, but none that I'm aware of. But I do know Polk County is participating. Pinellas County opted out. And what comes with that is a big ticket, which I know you probably have discussed. I'm sure the school district has, from what I've been told, they didn't want to pay for it. They voted not to pay for it and to go to the local cities and have the cities pay for it. If you voted on it, I don't know what your decision was, and I apologize that I'm not up to date on that. But what I can tell you is the legislature's intent is to put it squarely on the school districts. The school districts have a rainy day fund. They have Pinellas County has $43 million in the rainy day fund. And many parents would say it's raining right now. The other thing that they have is they have legally the ability to levy a tax to pay for this. And they have the time to put it on referendum and do that. And I like that because it's kind of cost control. You know exactly how much it is and how much you're bringing in. Because if we hit a recession, the cities are going to have to cut back. And what are they going to cut back? Probably that, because you have to take care of your public works and your fire and your sheriff's contract and everything else. So I like the concept of them taking the whole thing and putting a levy on that, and it's strictly for public safety. But they have the legal ability to do that. So that's up to the school district and all of you to decide how you want to manage that. But the legislature did put it squarely on the backs of the school districts. The other pieces of the bill that you probably haven't heard is we are going to put a licensed mental health counselor in every single school. That licensed mental health counselor cannot do anything else. They can't be a hall monitor. They can't be a cafeteria monitor. They can't be a teacher's assistant. They can do nothing else except be a caring adult to any child in that school that needs help. And so that is, I think it was $96 million we put in the budget to fund that. We put $69 million in the budget to fund the Guardian program for any school that wanted to use those resources. And then we put $95 or $96 million in the budget to pay for police officers. So the school district can pull down a lot of that money. Some other things that the school districts are doing, Hillsborough County doesn't use law enforcement every day because with law enforcement you have to contract with them 12 months a year. And you have to pay their pension, you have to pay their health care. So Hillsborough County contracts with a security agency, and they get licensed security guards that are trained to meet the same capacity of training. And so they contract with them for only the 7 months of the year that kids are in school. And then they're not liable for the pension and the health care and stuff like that as part of the contract. But the cost for them to outfit every school is like $1.5 million, and the cost to outfit the schools in Pinellas to do all law enforcement is about $20 million. So I think there's some creative ways in which the school and the community can work together to determine how we're going to meet the needs and the new laws that are put in schools. So the other thing we did is we also put more money in mental health and services and addiction services, because we know that the number one reason kids are taken away from their families and put in foster care is mental health and addiction, right? And so, and a lot of these shootings have been associated with mental health. So what we did is we funded more CAT teams and more FIT teams. And what is a CAT team? And what is a FIT team? A CAT team is if a law enforcement officer goes in for a call for child neglect or for child abuse, if it is determined that the family is at risk because of mental illness, they will send a CAT team, which is a mobile unit with several professionals that will wrap services around the entire family. So the child's going to get services, the parent that has the issue is going to get services, and any other member of that family, close member of that family, is going to get services. And so then the child and the rest of the family is going to understand the illness, they're going to understand what the triggers are, they're going to understand signs and symptoms, and they're going to understand coping mechanisms for themselves, and how to get their parent help. So a FIT team is the same thing, except if it's an addiction problem. Well, we know most of the time mental health and addiction go together, but we also know with addiction and this opiate crisis, what we do know is the vast majority of the people dying and that are addicted to opiates, based on the data we have, the vast majority got addicted from doctors prescribing too much opiates. So many people were getting 30-day and 60-day prescriptions, and that's how they got addicted. It wasn't the casual use of experimenting and then eventually getting addicted. What we have found with this opiate problem is it really came from doctors prescribing. So, so that's another piece of the bill. And then there's two other pieces that came from our sheriff. One of them is if the sheriff would call, even here, if the sheriff goes on a call for someone that's a threat to themselves or to someone else, so they've been threatening to harm someone else or themselves, when they go on that call, they could go in the house and they could see 20 handguns or 20 guns on the kitchen counter. And by law, they cannot confiscate those guns. The sheriff has been doing it, but if they come back and want them, he has to give them back. So we had no control over this. And when you get Baker Acted, many people think you're getting treatment while you're Baker Acted. And really what a Baker Act facility is, it's a crisis stabilization unit. So you're really not getting treatment. You're just getting your crisis stabilized. Sometimes you get medication, sometimes you don't. But once you've calmed down and you're not in that crisis anymore, then they will give you, you'll see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist will determine whether you can be released and go home. So many times people get out of a Baker Act in 24 or 48 hours. They don't necessarily stay for the full 72 hours. And so the sheriff's concern is when you have somebody who's threatening to kill their spouse or a neighbor, and you couldn't confiscate those guns, and that person could get out in 24, 48 hours, and sometimes they've been Baker Acted 15, 30 times, and they know exactly what to say and do to get released. And so his concern is they would come back home to those 20 guns on the counter, and is that problematic? So what he got us to do is put in law that now law enforcement has the ability to confiscate those guns. They can only confiscate them for 60 days. They write a right of protection, I believe it's called, but it's kind of like a restraining order. So if someone gets Baker Acted because they're a danger to themselves or someone else, they will have this document that will prevent them from having their guns back for 60 days. So now a sheriff or a judge or a psychiatrist can say, this person is too dangerous, should never have his guns back. And then he'll never get his guns back. But if he just gets released and goes through the normal process, 60 days later, he can go to the sheriff's office and he can get his guns back. If the psychiatrist says never, they never can. If by chance they were Baker Acted and they shouldn't have been, and the psychiatrist determines that they shouldn't have been Baker Acted, then they get their guns back right away. That's one component. The next component is when you get Baker Acted, it's a health care issue. So the law says nobody with a mental illness should be able to buy a gun, right? But there's nothing in the healthcare system that pings the judicial system, and when we do a background check, it only checks the judicial system. So the only time someone with a mental illness would trigger the background check component would be if they went to court and they were determined incompetent to stand trial. Well, most of our people with mental illness never actually go to court. Our homeless people don't go to court. A lot of people that get Baker Acted never go to court, and so they never get that determination that they're incompetent to stand trial, so it never hits the judicial system. So in this case, Nicholas Cruz had been Baker Acted quite a few times, and he went in and could buy a gun because there was no ping in the judicial system from a Baker Act. So what the sheriff suggested is that they write this is where he writes that thing that I believe it's a right of protection, but it's again like a restraining order. And just like that same restraining order that prevents you from getting your guns back, it also pings the judicial system for 60 days unless a judge extends it forever or eliminates it, right? So for 60 days, if that person gets out of their Baker Act within the next 60 days and they try to buy a gun, it will ping on the background check and they won't be able to purchase it. That is something nobody has in place currently. So that's kind of all the stuff that we put in that bill. It was a huge bill. There's a lot in it. I just summarized a lot of it, but it's pretty big, comprehensive. And now other states in the nation are looking at that bill as the starting point of where they may want to go with other possibilities. So that's what's in that school safety bill. It's a big nut. To a lot of people, it's a little frightening because they don't want guns in school. But again, the school districts have the opportunity to participate or not. And that's kind of it. As far as the legislative update, that's about the best I've got today. But I'd take any questions that you have, because I might not have touched on some of your stuff. Watch out, vacation rentals, if it's a problem in your city, which I don't know if it is here. I haven't heard many complaints in Madeira Beach. But the Airbnb and the home away, the lobby is very strong. And it is their goal to take away cities' ability to have any nuisance laws that have to do with rentals. So you guys did a lot on your nuisance laws and really made a difference several years ago. And if that is taken away from you, your ability to have nuisance laws, that could be problematic. So again, be involved in the League of Cities, know what's going on, but develop a relationship with your legislative delegation so that you can make some phone calls. And if they don't, and I've said this many times, if they don't support the home rule, then you guys are the closest to the people, and you can make sure that the citizens know how they're treating the city at the state level, and they can make determinations on whether they want to keep them in office. So you have a lot of power at local government if you engage, and it's really important to engage. So, any questions?
I got a question for you on the school and putting people in there. A couple people brought this to me. I volunteer at the VA, and some veterans have said, why aren't they hiring veterans that, 20 or 30 years, they've been taught how to use a weapon, and put them in there. I know most of them don't want to work full-time, but if you put 5 veterans in school A, and they rotate, and I might do 1 or 2 days, or something like that. And there's no benefit cost, because most of them have the TRICARE and stuff like that, and it's something for them to do. Has anyone ever looked at that?
Yes, Hillsborough, that's what Hillsborough County does. So the security agency that they contract with, they hire veterans, retired police officers, a litany of professionals, firefighters, retired, litany of professionals that do know how to handle this, know how to handle crisis management and how to deal with a crisis. And so that's exactly what Hillsborough County is doing. And my guess is that the sheriff's department and other police departments may consider hiring some retired folks that they know they're going to place in the schools. But again, if they're 12 months a year, what are they doing with them? That's a big expense. What do you do with them? They can do vacations in the summer and rotate to give vacations in the summer. But again, that's a whole different ballgame. So many counties and school districts are doing it through the security agencies, which are utilizing veterans exactly in the way you're talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Peters, hi. I just wanted to ask you again, under the martial law that you were talking about on
Yeah.
school teachers, the ones that are trained to carry the guns, the concealed weapons, are they known as to other members of the facility as to who is carrying guns and who isn't?
No, and the martial law didn't get into law, only the Guardian program, when the Guardian program says no teachers. Now, if the Sheriff Judd is still, and he's the only one I know that does this, if he's still deputizing teachers, that makes them law enforcement, and that's a different ballgame. But no, they don't know. Nobody knows. Any other questions? You guys are easy, thank you. So before I go, what I'd like to do is close and thank you all. Madeira Beach has just been wonderful to me, and you've all been very supportive and open to letting me meet with you and talk to you about what's going on in Tallahassee, and I truly appreciate it. I really do. So I want to thank you. This will be my last legislative update for you because I won't be running again for the House of Representatives. Again, I'll be running for County Commission for John Maroney's seat, and I know his family would welcome some prayers, but thank you again. You all have been so gracious, and thank you for the public service that you do. I sat in the mayor's seat before, I sat in a commissioner's seat before, and I know how hard it can be. And sometimes the decisions that you have to make are not easy. So thank you all for your public service. I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming, and we appreciate your service and taking the time out of your busy day to be here, give us an update. And good luck with your
Thank you, Mayor.
next job. All right, next we have the city fiscal management, no, I'm sorry, the 2017 Audit and Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, John Hauser has been the auditor for the city for the last couple of years. He's with the firm of Wells Hauser, Schatzel in Satchel, PA, and he engaged in the city's audit of the financial statements and also prepared the CAFR for the year ended September 30, 2017. And with that, I'll present John.
Good afternoon, everyone. Do you have a copy of the CAFR? I think maybe it was included in your agenda packets. Also, you should have received, there is a 2-page separate letter. This is called a required communication. The required communication just states we've completed the audit for the fiscal year ended September 30, 2017. Thank you. Under the qualitative aspects of the accounting practices, there were no new accounting standards implemented during the year. The city did implement GASB 68 in fiscal 2015, and that standard requires the city to reflect its net pension obligation and the related deferred inflows and outflows in the government-wide statements. The city adopted no new accounting policies, and the existing policies were not changed. For fiscal 9/30/18, there will be a new standard. It's very similar to the pension standard, but it deals with the other post-employment benefits, whereby the city will, like the pension, have to recognize a net OPEB obligation, liability, and the related deferred inflows and outflows in the government-wide statement. And that will have some impact on your fund balance as to what that liability is going to be. It will be determined through an actuarial valuation by an outside consultant. The next item is management estimates. The most significant estimate within the CAFR is the useful lives of your capital assets. That useful life is used to calculate the depreciation on the government-wide statements as well as the enterprise fund governmental fund statements. The lives used by the city are those based on class lives used in governmental accounting, and we deemed them to be reasonable and consistent prior years. We didn't have any difficulties in dealing with management or employees of the city during our audit. We had no disagreements with management. We were provided all the information we requested, and all our inquiries were responded to in a timely manner. We did propose 2 significant journal entries. They were both within the stormwater fund. The first was to reclassify principal debt payments in the amount of $352,000. They were reclassified from a current year expense account to a liability to reduce the outstanding debt within the stormwater fund. So this entry decreased expenses and decreased the long-term debt liability. The second item, also in the stormwater fund, was for a retainage payable on the Boca Ciega Stormwater Improvement Project, the amount of about $415,000. The entry increased construction in progress asset and increased the liability, so there was really no effect on the bottom line as far as revenues or expenditures. Other items, we did note that the city was subject to the state single audit. That is, you have expended more than $750,000 in state assistance. There's a schedule of that assistance within the CAFR. The state single audit parallels the federal single audit in many ways, minor differences, but the federal single audit uniform guidance for September 30, 2018 requires anyone subject to a single audit to have written procedures and standards of conduct surrounding grants administration from the grant application process through the grant closeout process. Currently, the city has a number of people involved in the grants administration from the application to the implementation, reimbursements, and closeout. And we would recommend that the city develop and approve and adopt written policies and procedures to appropriately administer its grants programs and assigning responsibility as to who does what with the administration of the grants. That's it for that report. There are a number of other reports. In the CAFR, you'll find the table of contents, the transmittal letter, and then management's discussion and analysis. After you get through the Roman numerals on page 1, which is probably 10 or 15 pages into the document, is our independent auditor's report. We have audited the financial statements for the year ended September 30, 2017. It's management's responsibility for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statement in accordance with GAAP, and it's our responsibility to express an opinion on the financial statements based on our audit. And based on our audit procedures, we've concluded we've obtained enough audit evidence to express an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements of the city. The balance of the audit reports are in the very back of the document. They begin on page 84. First report is called the Report on Internal Control over Compliance and Compliance and Other Matters. We noted no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the internal controls of the city during the audit, and we noted no instance of non-compliance during the performance of our procedures. Page 85 and 86 is the report required under the Single Audit Act. This is very similar, but it's specifically for the state and federal funds the city receives. The city did expend more than $750,000 in state financial assistance, so there was a state single audit. There was not a federal single audit. The federal funds are really, the only federal funds you receive are the FEMA flood mitigation grants, and those were less than the $750,000 threshold, although we did apply compliance procedures to those grants also. In our opinion, the city complied in all material respects with the compliance requirements for both the federal and state awards programs. And it still is management's responsibility to establish and maintain those internal controls to ensure the compliance of the grant programs. The recommendation we made that you should have written policies and procedures, I think, will strengthen that, and that there needs to be, like I say, assignment of responsibilities for who does what with the management of the grants. We didn't identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, but once again, we would recommend you'd have those written policies and procedures. Page 88 is the Independent Auditor's Management Letter. This is required by the Auditor General of the state of Florida. There were no prior year findings and no current year findings to address. The city is required to file an annual financial report with the State of Florida Department of Financial Services. We did agree that report to the information in the CAFR, so that the two do agree. We didn't note any conditions that would indicate the city's in a state of financial emergency. We did apply financial condition assessment procedures. These are compares 24 financial ratios over a 5-year period and compares it to other cities of comparable population, taxable value, and fund structure. The comparable cities that were included: the town of Bal Harbor Village, city of Daytona Beach Shores, town of Highland Beach, city of Madison, and the city of Indian Rocks Beach. In order to, there's three ratings: favorable, unfavorable, or inconclusive. To receive either a favorable or unfavorable, over 60% or more of the 24 indicators have to be one or the other. If they don't meet that, that is, they're both less than 60%, it's a default inconclusive rating. Most of the cities I work with all receive that inconclusive, and the Madeira did also. I've provided those graphs, those ratios to Mr. Pierce. If anyone's interested, I'm sure he can share those with you. Page 90 is our report in accordance with the rules of the Auditor General 10.556. This has to do with the city's investments. The city does have an investment policy, and we determined the city was in compliance with the statute and its locally adopted policy. Page 91, in accordance with rules Auditor General 10.557, has to do with the Deepwater Horizon oil spill monies. A couple of years ago, you did receive a settlement. Those funds are earmarked within fund balance. Beyond receiving the funds and paying the attorneys, there hasn't been any expenditure of those funds. The amount, I believe, is around $450,000, and it is reserved as a part of fund balance. I'd like to focus on the one government-wide statement that begins on page 15. This is your statement of net position, or balance sheet, if you will. The total assets and deferred outflows of the city increased about $2.1 million, or 4% from the previous year. Capital assets were up $3.8 million. Due from other governments and prepaid items increased about $400,000, and cash and investments decreased about $2.1. And the reason for the decrease in the cash is just your normal debt service, but there was additional advance payments made on one of the issues, and also the monies expended for the capital outlay or capital assets. The total liabilities and deferred outflows decreased about $1 million, or 6%. Accounts payable and retainages payable and accrued items increased about $550,000. Your net pension liability increased about $200,000, and the long-term debt decreased about $1.75 million. Assets less the liabilities equals your net position. The net position's in three categories. You've got items invested in capital assets, you have various restricted funds, and then you have the unrestricted funds. The net investment in capital assets increased about $5.5 million. Restricted net position increased about 3.8, and the unrestricted net position decreased about 6.3 million. The decrease in the unrestricted is due to the increases in the restricted and the amounts expended for capital assets. Now, the city does have a fund balance policy. The policy states the city shall maintain a minimum unassigned fund balance equal to 2 months of budgeted expenditures, or approximately 17%. That minimum amount would be $1,130,000, and the actual unassigned fund balance at 9/30/17 was in excess of $5 million. So you more than meet that requirement of that fund balance policy. You also have a part in the policy that addresses emergency storm response. That reserve shall equal 1/3 of the budgeted expenditures for the coming fiscal year, and that amount is $2,236,000, and the actual reserve, as it's reflected in the CAFR, is that $2,236,000. Now, there's a lot in this document. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but please take your time to go through it. If you individually have any questions, Mr. Pierce can direct you how to get in touch with me. I'll be glad to talk with you about that. But in conclusion, I'd just like to thank management and the staff of the city for their assistance. It was a long process, interrupted by Hurricane Irma, and we started in around September, and here we are in May. So a lot of this is ancient history already. But if anyone has any questions, I'll try to address them now. If not, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howard.
Okay.
Mayor, I thought there were four interesting items. Like last year, I read through this whole thing. And I thought last year, oh, we have to have some questions, but I did the same thing this year, and I have to ask Mr. Pierce because I've got lots of stuff. But I thought there were four significant things that were not really figures per se, but they were statistics with regards to Madeira Beach. And I thought maybe our population might like to know it. I mean, there's a lot in here, but on our 1 square mile of property in Madeira Beach, we've got 14.8 miles of paved roads. I know that might be just something for, what would you call it? Trivia questions. Our median age is going up. In 2008, it was 45, and in 2017, it's 55. So it's gone up by 10 years. But from my going around the neighborhoods this year, I see a lot of youth moving in, so that figure might go down again. And I noticed that the largest employer was Winn-Dixie with 200 employees, and next to that was Publix with 140. And the last thing is that the principal property, the two largest, I guess, not employers, the two largest taxpayers that we have in Madeira Beach. The first one is Shaner's, which is the Marriott, and they have $100,000 of taxable value. And the second largest principal property taxpayer is Investors Warranty, and that's the Hubbard property. That's the Hubbard Garage and the Hooters and all that property, and that's the taxable value, not the market value, but the taxable value is $11,820,000. I thought those were kind of interesting. Nobody might care, but I thought they were kind of interesting.
Also more good trivia. Thank you.
We definitely know who we're going to call when you have to phone a friend for that trivia.
Any more discussion? All right, next we have the city fiscal management presentation. Mr. Director Pierce.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, our investment advisor for the city is Nicholas Roca. He's with PFM Financial Advisors, And on May 9th, he gave a good presentation to the Budget Committee, and his presentation focused on the city's debt and fund balance overview. And at the last workshop last week, last Tuesday, we used a lot of his slides and what he had presented. And a little bit of an issue that we're facing regarding a $1.2 million payment on the Series 2014 bond that's coming up in November. And we asked Nick to provide options just so that we could have some available. And a lot of that was discussed last Tuesday. And so Nick is here to summarize that one more time for you and to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Commissioners. As Walt introduced me, I'm Nick Rocca. I'm with PFM, the city's financial advisor, and today I'll be giving a brief overview of some of the topics discussed at your last meeting. So we're going to go over the Series 2014 bond refinancing options, as well as a quick overview of the fund balance policy. So starting off with the Series 2014 bond refinancing, to give you an overview of the prior financing, the city's interlocal payments revenue bond, Series 2014, was originally issued in the amount of a little over $3 million back in 2014 and featured a final maturity of November 1st, 2018. And we're starting to come upon that now. The bond was originally structured to be allowed to be prepaid at whole, in part, or at any time in whole or in part. The final maturity there in 2018 was sort of structured as a bullet. In 2018, it was originally about $1.7 million. The city has prepaid a portion of that, so right now it's down to about $1.2 million. And the city originally kind of planned to pay that down more so it wouldn't be as high of a burden coming up here on this final payment. But as Walt discussed at the last meeting, some of these proceeds from the funding for Pinellas have been used for phase 2 of the undergrounding of the utilities. And this has kind of stemmed from a timing issue of when you receive these penny for Pinellas monies. So the city reached out to me and asked me to provide some refinancing options to kind of help with the budgeting issue here. And we went back to the bank that the loan is with currently, Seaside Bank, and got rate options to extend it either 2 to 3 years out. So the chart there that you see in the middle of the page, the green bar, that represents what's currently due on November 1st, 2018. So if nothing was done, that's how much you would have to pay, a little over almost $1.3 million. The yellow bars there represent the 2-year extension option, which equates to about $450,000 per year in annual debt service. And the blue bars represent a 3-year extension, which represents about a little over $340,000 per year in annual debt service. So the 2-year extension would go out to November 1st, 2020, which would be fiscal year 2021. And the 3-year extension would have a final maturity of November 1st, 2021, which would be fiscal year 2022. So the difference between the 3-year extension and the 2-year extension, the 3-year extension would be about roughly $107,000 less per year of annual debt service, but you have that one extra payment you have to make in fiscal year 22, but it will give you a little bit more budgetary relief over the 2-year extension option. Both of these financing options would feature a small prepayment fee of about 20 basis points, which at no time would this fee, even if you decided that you want to prepay the day after and all that nearly $1.3 million of this refinancing loan was outstanding, the math on that works out to less than $2,700, and that prepayment fee will go down as you start to prepay or as you do your regular payments of this new loan. Want to remind the commission here that the rate is currently being held by the bank through the end of June, so June 30th. So if we don't close this by the end of June, the rate is subject to be reset. Right now, rates are holding kind of level, but we don't know what's going to happen in July. So the rate could be potentially higher if it's not approved at the June 12th meeting. And I know there has been some discussion about possibly using some of the fund balance to pay this down. And while that is an option, there are some side effects that could come from that as from a ratings aspect. Paying down the fund balance currently is about $5.1 million today. If we paid this all off, it would cost about $1.2, $1.3 million to pay down this loan strictly from fund balance. And kind of the metrics that the rating agencies look at, one of them is kind of the 5-year history of your fund balance, and that has already started to kind of trend down. And your available cash balance, that's also kind of trended down. So paying out of fund balance could also negatively impact your rating, and that would obviously affect the borrowing rates in the future if the city were to finance in the future. I can't just exactly tell you that would create a notch lower in your rating, but there's that potential. And that's kind of the wrap up here for the Series 2014 bond refinancing options, and happy to take any questions anybody might have on this topic.
I'll ask the same question as I asked last week.
Yep.
I don't understand it. Basically, what I was being told was if we pay it off early, or if we pay it off when it's due, okay, we're not paying it off early, we're paying it off when it's due, that it could lower our rating. Where if we extend it out, then it doesn't hurt us. But then what happens when we pay it off, when it comes in 2022 or 2021 to pay it off? We're in the same position as we are now, but if we pay it off, it's going to hurt our rating. What is the difference?
The difference is that it was originally planned to be paid by the penny for Pinellas monies, and to pay it now due to budgetary issues, it would have to come mostly from the fund balance. So you're knocking down your unassigned fund balance amount. It would take a hit about $1.2, $1.3 million. Whereas if we stretch it out to payments of $340,000 to $450,000, those are much less payments every year. So it wouldn't have.
You're just saying it's less money out of the fund balance, but you know what I was hearing last Tuesday was, well, if we pay it off early, we're going to be hurt, or we're not paying it off early. We're paying it off when it's due, and they use the analogy of, you know, if you pay your credit card off. I'm thinking if I pay my credit card off on time, it doesn't hurt. If I don't pay it off on time and I'm charged interest, you know, that really doesn't hurt either. Your credit rating. So I can't understand why paying it off, other than lowering the cash that we'd have available for something, an emergency, let's say, out of the fund balance, how that hurts.
Well, originally, this payment was originally supposed to be smaller. The plan was originally to pay this down. So the previous payments, I believe, were around the $400,000 amount per year. And now we have a spike of $1.2, $1.3 million that's now due on November 1st, 2018. So it was originally supposed to be a lower payment if it was to be prepaid as originally scheduled.
So we're asking the residents to pick up an additional $100,000 in interest that we're going to have to pay over the next 3 years or somewhere around there.
Yeah, depending on the 2 to 3 year option, it could give you numbers aren't completely final yet, but around less. I think it's a little less than $100,000 for the 3-year option.
Thank you.
But it gives you the budgetary relief.
Madam Mayor, if I may, with respect to the options that are proffered here this afternoon, in the event that the board was to consider the 2 or 3 year option, that if the board decided to say, okay, pay the $1.2 million, you're taking that money from fund balance, which is effectively the contributions that your taxpayers have made to pay off that. In the event that you extend the loan, whatever the interest payments and costs for going out for the loan will be absorbed by the penny for Pinellas. So the first dollar, if we go ahead and we pay the $1.2 million, we'll eventually end up getting it back from the county, but it is based on when the distribution schedule and all that happens. In the event that we were to do, and you would pay that up front from our tax dollars. If you were to do what we're proposing is, in essence, you're allowing for the penny for Pinellas distribution to incur all the costs that would be associated with bond counsel and with the interest. So it would be absorbed in that. So in essence, you would not be paying, our taxpayers would not be paying a larger contribution if we decided to extend out the terms and conditions of the loan. To Nick's point earlier, with respect to how this balloon payment at the end is established. In most situations, especially for an agency our size, you would want to have payments that were more manageable. Now, I can't speak to why that 1.2 was effectively determined to be paid here in 2018, but obviously there was foresight to make a payment of $400-some thousand to lessen that number, because we could have been here having the conversation about $1.7 million. And our concern is with that drawdown on fund balance and that being such a large number for the organization, that it will be noted in our audit, and it will be something that we would have to explain in the event that we ever went out for to borrow money or any other issuance. So it's just something that we just want to be mindful, but also the financial liquidity that you're able to gain, the $106,000 or $107,000 per year, that's money that provides for a little bit more flexibility on capital projects for the penny for Pinellas, so you can actually help to fund some of the other projects that you have, and that will be presented to the board as part of the fiscal year 2019 budget. So we did want to kind of get the board's opinion where you would like to go on this particular item, because the rates were holding fast at this particular rate, and if we continue to allow for time to expire, the rate would fluctuate. And if the board says that they want us to pay the $1.2 million, then we need to start making the arrangements to be able to prepare for that as well.
So
When
you're
was this
saying that-
report actually done? Because the other one I have had it at the 2-year at 3.18, and now it's at 3.25, and at 3.18, we were gonna be 82,000 in extra interest that we're gonna be paying, but as the city manager said, it's gonna be coming out of the penny for Pinellas money, but that's just gonna drop that by the 82,000 and or the 107,000 if we went on the 3-year. Because it's still gotta come out of there, and it's still money that we're not gonna have to put towards underground, whatever else we do with the penny for Pinellas. It's still there, and it's still a hard cost to the city.
Right.
Regardless of where it comes from.
Madam Mayor and Commissioner, we started having the conversation, and Director Pierce may be able to opine on that. Since I became part of the organization, we started having the discussions about it, and we have seen the interest rates fluctuate a couple basis points just because of things that are happening in the market. So I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, and Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, since the original conversation we've had to now, the rate has changed.
Yeah, well, the 2-year option, yeah, when we first started the discussion, they were actually much higher, and we were able to negotiate them down a little bit. But the difference between I think it said 318 for the 2-year option.
3.18.
Yeah, that was an indicative rate given by the bank on the 2-year option, and when they came back with their official term sheet, it was the same rate as a 3-year. They were willing to hold it at the same rate as a 3-year option. The difference between, I think the present value of a basis point is only about $178. So the difference there is only about $1,000 or so dollars increase in the 2-year example.
It's still close to $100,000. I mean, it's
Yeah, the
still
total
there, and it's
interest.
still a cost to us, and that's what we have to decide if we want to incur the other cost or which way to go.
And I can tell you, and Nick is certainly the financial advisor, so I would defer to his expertise. The conversation that we will have with the board in June to talk about what do we do with the potential increases in the parking revenue by creating a new revenue stream and utilizing that to help pay your debt. When it's looked at by lending institutions and your auditor, they're going to see, okay, well, effectively they created another revenue stream to help offset and pay the debt. If you take from your savings account to pay that debt, they're going to ask the reason and the rationale behind it, and there's a lot more questions. If we wanted to draw down on our fund balance, it's something that progressively we need to say that there's a directive or an edict from the board to say we want to slowly draw down our fund balance, and we're going to do it to invest just in capital infrastructure projects or just to do this. So there is an explanation and rationale, but if we take that $1.2 million bite, that's something that's going to be concerning. And correct me if I'm wrong with anything I've stated, Nick.
That's great, from the rating agency's point of view. That's correct.
You know, I kind of agree with Commissioner Oakley in that, you know, that 107,000, you said it was going to be paid back by, you know, pennies for Pinellas. But we're going to get that 107 if we pay it all off in 2018. So that 107,000, basically, we're taking away from some other project down the road.
From the third phase of
Yeah.
undergrounding or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, I understand having more capital to work with right now. I understand rather than having that extra money in our balance fund. I understand that. But what I'm not getting a good picture in my head is, you know, asking the taxpayers to pick up extra debt and of $100,000. So one way or the other, the taxpayers are picking up an additional $100,000 in debt, period. You know, there's no way around it. I don't care who refunds you. The taxpayers are still.
It's still a hard cost of borrowing the
Yeah.
money for the extra time.
Yeah.
Right, but the vernacular and the terminology we're using is not necessarily the most appropriate. It's the penny for Pinellas, which is paid, it goes to the state and then it ends up coming in the distribution here. So it's folks that have visited all throughout Pinellas County. It's not the Madeira Beach taxpayer per se exclusively that's paying for it. It's a situation how the penny for Pinellas works. So based on population, the allocation, those types of things. So in the event that we were to say to go out for borrowing, yes, there will be costs associated with that, but it's not something that the Madeira Beach taxpayer exclusively is paying for. If we pull from fund balance to pay this note, the Madeira Beach taxpayer will pay that $1.2 million until we get the reimbursement from the county. So realistically, what we would have to do, we would almost be in a waiting pattern to make sure all our distributions come in before we could effectively say plan out for whatever projects that we have, because the penny for Pinellas is based on allocations, based on, you know, numbers and data and a formula. And that's one of the things that elected officials throughout the county have been working on, is the distribution for the penny for Pinellas and looking for the money to be front loaded as opposed to it being back loaded. So it really is, you know, what the pleasure of the board is. Either way, we would like some type of commitment or consensus from the board as to how you would like for us to proceed on this particular matter, because we need to start making some arrangements and some decisions if it's the board's pleasure to say, yes, we're amenable to going out for 2 years or 3 years. We have had this discussed by the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee has provided an opinion. There's representatives here from the Budget Committee that can share their perspectives with the board as well.
And one more point I'd like to make, while there would be interest expense, obviously allocated if we do extend the loan, the city does have the option to prepay, as mentioned, so that could cut if you pay it after 1 or 2, if you happen to come on a windfall or decide to pay it down early, you could cut some of that interest expense as well.
That is a plus, because most of them want you to go out to the end of the term of whatever it is because they want that money that they're getting
Right,
interest.
'cause yeah.
But that is a plus if you can pay it off early to go that route too.
I just wanted to make clear that one of the reasons why we're facing, one more time, why we're facing this issue is that there was a delay in the Phase 1 for the undergrounding, which is tied to this, and the start of Phase 2, which is, and I talked to Steve Tart. Okay.
Hi, Steve Tar, CPWG, y'all know me. So we are getting ready, so DOT threw a curveball in the permitting process, starting Phase 2. So we've pretty much, I say pretty much, we're like 99% resolved. We're actually resubmitting the permit tomorrow or the following day. Once we get that, then we're gonna come back to the board to issue the PO to do the Phase 2 construction. We're hoping to do that in June, at the latest July. One of the first things will be done out of that, there'll be a $450,000 payment due to Duke Energy. So that will be the first payment that we'll do. So I would anticipate that to be in July, August, and then you guys would have the reimbursement after that. There'll also be a reimbursement up front for Frontier or or charter, I forget which one, that's around 100,000. So you're going to be around 550 to 600,000 immediately here before or during the month of August. So that 1.2 will decrease potentially in half. And then, of course, we're going to be under construction on that, and then we'll start chomping away at that at pretty good bits between now and when we're finished, sometime around the end of the year, first part of next year. So that may help with some of the decisions you're trying to make.
Is there anyone from the Budget Committee who would like to speak?
Good day. My name's Roger Pryor of the Budget Committee, and this is Tom Edwards. And we shared a lot of your concerns and a lot of discussions. We spent several hours with the quizzes of every detail of this. And what it boiled down to me was that it's like landing an airplane. We can hit the runway real hard, or we can come in on glide slope, which is the lights that tell you where you're at. And the real focus of my understanding of this is we have options, and we can actually pay any parts of this as it comes due or as our budget or our monies come in. It's like we want to have a smooth payoff here and not do anything abrupt. We don't know what's going to happen a little later in the year. We may have another Irma or one of these other characters come through our town. Hopefully not. And we need to be prepared for it. And we just want, what we decided was we would recommend just going with a 3-year plan so that we could have a smoother landing to pay all of this off. What we don't want to do is spend an additional $84,000 of taxpayer money. But what we want to do is have an option, depending on how the penny for Pinellas or these monies come in, as to how much we pay and when we can do it. Because my understanding, and I don't know how you are, Tom's going to tell you his understanding too, okay, is that we have options to where we can pay a little, we can pay a lot, we can pay the whole thing off soon by going to the 3-year plan as an option. So that's what we were recommending.
You've hired a group of professionals, the city manager I'm very impressed with, Walt and the finance director, and we looked at the recommendations that they made. I hate paying interest to the banks. I pay my credit card off every month. I hate giving them a cent. But if I go and make an expenditure of buying a new car or something like this, I don't want to take all the money out of my savings to go ahead and buy it. I might go ahead and pay half down and go ahead and take a 5-year mortgage loan on it, and then I have the option. I can go ahead and prepay that, which is what I've done. I've started doubling up on my payments and paid off sooner. And you have that option too. This $107,000 that you saw is actually how much money that if you do a 3-year extension, you'd get $107,000 extra that you can use for infrastructure, beautification, Johns Pass, things like that that you've discussed. It was in the Beach Beacon, yesterday's paper. And the city manager, I guess there was some discussion as to, well, you should give maybe 25% for Johns Pass or 50% for infrastructure. My recommendation is if you do the 3-year extension, you're going to have $321,000 extra that you can go ahead and spend on these particular projects. And I told the city manager, I says that instead of allocating a certain percentage for each of these, give him 4 or 5 categories that you want to allocate this money for, and let him be flexible in where he's going to spend that. Because when he's going to do a project, he's going to come in and talk to you at workshop. It's going to come to a consent agenda as to financing the particular project they're going to do. So you're not going to be left in the dark. Don't tie his hands with saying that this percentage has to go to Johns Pass. I think they should get that. The businessmen, you know, are concerned about the parking meters and their customers and keeping the customers there for a period of time. But I think this gives you some options to go ahead and take care of some infrastructure needs, which are very important to the city, and it just gives you a little bit more flexibility. If we did have a major hurricane come here, you're going to need all the money that you can get, that you have on hand. I worked Hurricane Andrew down in Homestead. It looked like an atomic bomb went off. I mean, you can't believe the devastation. If we ever had a Cat 5 come through here, concrete buildings were actually moved off their foundations. So we're going to need that option and that flexibility. That's all I have to say.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just like to remind the council one more time, the last bullet point there, that this rate is being held to the end of June. I believe the only official meeting is on June 12th for this to be approved at. So that's something that, at the commission's desire, we could bring back and get approved then.
If it is the desire of the board, certainly staff would request consensus from the board to proceed forward with securing the appropriate documentation and working with bond counsel and our financial advisor to be able to bring you the appropriate closing documents at the June 12th meeting. So we would need some type of direction from the board to be able to do so.
Madam Mayor, I listened to the budget workshop, or the budget review workshop also, and I just want to be clear in my mind, and I favor the 3-year, okay, also, but I want to be firm in my mind that, first of all, it sounded like, and I want to make sure that everybody understands it, we're not confusing the Series 14 bond refinancing options with anything to do with that 50-cent thing, okay? Because there's been some, I know we know that, but I want everybody to know that because I've had some conversation on that. But I think that there are certain infrastructure things that have not been brought to my attention, or maybe nobody's attention in the last year, that have been really cropping up. I think one of the big things that we must think of when you talk about the hurricane season, we have to have a generator for this building.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just a given, you know. When this building was completed in 2015, it was completed with as I understand it, a no-maintenance building. There was going to be no maintenance on it. It never had to be done. And of course there's maintenance on it. There's going to be a lot of maintenance on it. So I guess I have to think of all of these things that we might not have been aware of when we talked about, or when the administration at the time and the commissioners at the time talked about the Series 2014 with that $1 million to pay off in November of 2018. And things do change. I don't like to pay, I don't like debt either, but I think that the 3-year plan is a thought out one. I think that we've really spent a lot of our city manager's time and our staff's time and our time just reading about it. So I guess I would have to be a proponent of that. I would be in support of the 3-year.
I would like to, I can go with the 3-year, but I would like to see next year during budget, this brought back up to us, show us where we are, can we pay it off, can we get, because the sooner we pay it off, the less of $100,000 we're going to be paying. And that's going to be a concern to some people. But I can support that at this point, but I still haven't gone out and talked to a lot of people about it yet either to see what their feeling are. So that, you can go that way, and then by the time we come back, I can tell you where I really sit on it.
Mr. Evans, I'm with the 3-year plan.
I've got another question for you on this. That you have in 2019, so that's November of 2018, is that correct?
Correct, fiscal year 2019.
Okay, that's, thank you.
So we're going to get in so there is consensus from the board to proceed forward with the loan docs and putting everything together with the intent of refinancing our existing Series 2014 bond and looking to bring forward a 3-year extension. So we will work with our financial advisor and bond counsel and staff to bring that forward, and with the hope of having all that to the board here at the June 12th meeting. The second component of this particular presentation is the fund balance review policy. And that is one of the things that, as Director Pierce and I have been jumping into the budget, looking at the finances of the organization, really looking at the monies that we collect, how are we spending those monies, and if there is some opportunities for us to be flexible to take some of those monies and utilize them for some capital infrastructure needs and planning to address some of the concerns that have been communicated from the board as well as the residents. And so we thought it was appropriate for our financial advisor to look at our strength of our finances as an agency, but also looking at our fund balance policy and then really having a more in-depth conversation, because this will definitely roll into the budget conversations that we will have with the board. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it back off to Nick to take you through the fund balance policy review.
All right, thank you. And yeah, we wanted to bring to the board's attention mainly focus on here today the Emergency Storm Response Fund and how it's sized. Currently, it's, as you heard in the previous presentation, it's sized at 33% of the annual general fund operating expenditures, which that's equivalent to 4 months. Due to the continued growth expected in the city over the next few years, I discussed with Walt and the city manager about possibly altering that language a little bit, and what we came up with for the commission to consider is changing the sizing goal from exact 33% 4 months every year of the annual general fund operating expenditures to the lesser of either 2.2 million or 33% of the annual general fund operating expenditures. So updating this language, the main purpose of it is kind of to stop placing additional funds idle in this fund and allow the city to be proactive with those proceeds. If you see at the bottom, we have a summary of the general fund balances, and right now we're at $2,236,000 in the emergency reserve fund. So the target would be slightly under what we're currently at now. And to remind the commission as well is that the unassigned fund balance sizing target is currently 2 months, or roughly 17% of annual general fund operating expenditures, and that's currently sitting at $5.1 million as previously discussed. That could also be available if there was an emergency hurricane as well. But the main point was getting to a point where do we think the city would be comfortable at keeping this emergency reserve, and doesn't make sense to keep necessarily building up this specific fund going into the future as the city keeps expanding. So one other point is that in the fund balance policy, there's also language in there that if you were ever to draw down on this fund, that the city would replenish it up to what the policy stated goal is as soon as practical and at no point in less than 5 years. So we want to bring that up for discussion.
And I had a conversation, Madam Mayor and members of the board, I had a conversation with the finance director and our HR coordinator with respect to our exposure in the event that there was a storm or accident or incident, and we were to lose our capital infrastructure assets, what would we be exposed to as far as our deductible? And the number was $370,000. In addition to, we anticipated that if there was such an accident or incident, that there would be probably about $500,000 or $600,000 associated with debris removal. If you look at staffing costs and other ancillary expenses, we ballpark that a safe number on the high side would probably be about $1.7 million. Right now, that account has $2.1 million, and it is based on 33% of budgeted expenditures. So as the budgeted expenditures go up, the contribution to that account goes up, and that money in essence sits there. So you have realistically 2 fund balances. And what we wanted to propose to the board is that if we just to draw a line and say, okay, it's $2 million or 33%, whichever's less, and you put that aside for your rainy day fund, but any increases that you would experience, those would go in to fund operating capital, personnel, those types of things. Because right now, it's earmarked for that specific purpose. And when we look at other coastal communities, their fund balance number collectively is about probably 4 months of operating expenses, as opposed to where ours exceeds that. And there is that delicate balance as previously communicated. You don't want to have a situation where your residents look at your fund balance and say, well, don't ask me for any increases because you've got such a healthy fund balance. You need to draw down that fund balance. before you could effectively even consider coming to ask for any other increases in fees or taxes or what have you. So we're trying to find what's the delicate way to do that, but one of the things we did want the board to consider is a policy modification to the emergency management or storm response fund, and provide for an opportunity whereby you kind of put a cap on it, or on the other side, you can utilize it as a mechanism similar to that as Penny for Pinellas, to where you can use it to buy emergency equipment for the purposes of a storm or those types of things. But we have to be conscientious of how we utilize that, because if you draw down on that too quickly, then the rating agencies and all those other involved then start asking some questions. So it's something that we wanted to bring to the board's attention for conversation, and see kind of where the board is, if you want staff to look at the policy, look at some potential modifications, and then bring something back for you to consider at a future meeting.
I got two questions. Right now, we're standing at what, 2,236,971, right?
Right.
So if we dropped it to 2,200,000, where does that other $36,971 go to? Number one. And number two, I don't think we should have it at 2,200,000 or the lesser of. I think it should be 2,200,000, period. I don't like that lesser of.
Right, but you still have your operating expenses that are increased year over year over year, so.
But why do you want to bring this down?
I don't want to bring it down at all. I don't
That's
think
what
it's
I'm saying.
I don't think it's a good plan to bring it down.
That's what I'm saying. It should just be 2,200,000, period, flat across the board. And not, well, if we did, the fund balance drops, so now we're down to 1,980,000. I'm thinking it should stay at the 2,200,000 or just 2 million, either one. It doesn't
I think
matter.
just leave it the way it is and let it run at 33% of what it goes. Because whatever is in there, $36,000 is not gonna.
Understood, understand,
Go.
Mr. Oakley. But I'm saying, the wording they're using right there, or the lesser of, that's what I don't like.
Right.
For clarification, is not that we're asking the board to make a decision as to what you feel comfortable right now. We just want to see if there's an appetite for the board to direct staff to come back with some other options, show us some other cities, show us how they've handled this, and provide you some language, and then at that point. But if the board doesn't want to consider that, we don't want to go through the iterations to get all the data and the information, and it'd be something that the board is conceivably not interested in. And so that's kind of what we're asking for, is if you're amenable to having staff do the research, coming back and providing some language and some examples as to how other coastal communities address such a situation, we will certainly do that.
Mr.
I think
Evans?
that's what we should do, because the more information, the better decision we can make.
Mr. Evans, I guess what I'm kind of saying is, you said earlier that, our top dollar probably out of our pocket would be $1.7 million or $1.8 million, correct? Mm-hmm. So I don't understand, I don't want to put $3 million in there if that's 33%, so that's why I'm saying just we put a flat dollar amount cap on it and say, here's where we stop and we keep it at that. And if we don't use it this year, we still have it next year and we don't have to put into it again, if I'm understanding this correctly. So that was kind of the way I was looking at the whole thing.
The board can certainly put a cap on it, and it's something that it's done by virtue of a resolution. So you can change it at any time, at any year, to say, you know what, we're starting to see us and can continue to grow. Maybe we want to see it go up, a couple percentage, or even based on the municipal cost of, the municipal price index or the consumer price index or what have you. You have those mechanisms to do that, but when you have the number 33% of budgeted expenditures, that number is realistically a plug number, and there's no rhyme or reason, it's just a percentage to do that. Plus, you have the 16.67% in fund balance, which in essence is your rainy day fund. So you got a rainy day fund, and then you got a really rainy day fund. So we're trying to get to the point where, conceivably, we utilize the monies that are available. We decide, okay, here's $2 million or what have you, or $2.2 million, and then the additional revenue can go into other operational needs or other capital needs, but we thought that just that 33%, it was a really arbitrary number. You know, why did we pick 33%? Because it's double of 16.67%. There's no rationale behind it. So that's one of the things that we wanted to determine specifically and understand what we're shooting for and maintaining it accordingly. Because I guess you have your fund balance that is supposed to be for those types of things. And I've seen other communities that have in their fund balance 40%, and they don't have a disaster preparedness fund, and there are coastal communities as well. So there's a lot of different options out there, but if it is the pleasure of the board, certainly we can review it. We can bring you, you know, a litany of different options, some of our peer cities, and then you can make a public policy decision as to what you think is best.
There's
Madam
not a
Mayor, I think we should
state
review it.
mandated percentage?
Nope. GFOA recommends that you have at least 2 to 3 months of,
Operating expense?
yeah, expenditures, budgeted expenditures. And if we did a fund, and I did this probably about 2 years ago, if you look at fund balances, you'll have cities from 10% all the way up to 75%, 80%. It all just depends on the will of the board and what they think is appropriate. But I know there is a situation whereby, you know, residents start saying, you know, why are you carrying such a high fund balance?
Right, but you can always go back and explain it to them and say, you know, we've got $2.2 million in here in case we get hit by a hurricane. And they're gonna understand that part of that and all the other things that are already committed in there, the debt service and all those other things that fall into that category. It's very easy to explain, but instead of you just go bottom line. But the 2.2 to me makes me feel very comfortable in knowing that we're gonna be taken care of if something catastrophic hits our town.
And you still have the 5.1 million in the other fund balance account. So there's, you know, that's the duplication. You can have them separate, you can have them the same, but at the end of the day, we still have a very healthy and high fund balance. And so we wanted to say, you know what, we should look at this policy and we should see if there is any desire from the board to say, okay, $2.2 million is great, and we're not going to contribute anything else into that, and we'll consistently review it as part of the budget process. And if we need to make some journal entries or transferring money into that, you can certainly do that. But we just wanted to get away from that plug number, that 33% of budgeted expenditures. The auditor, what happens is the auditor comes in and audits and says, okay, Walt, transfer $50,000 into that account. So it just happens, it's just 33% and just continues to go in there. And what we can do is we can provide you how much money has been allocated into that account over the years and is in essence sitting there in the event that we have a storm event. But you have two fund balances that are unassigned and are not restricted to where you can utilize your fund balance on the general fund side, your 16%, or you can utilize the 33%, whichever, you know, you're wide open on those.
Well, I'm more comfortable leaving it the way it is at 33%. Now, the next conversation you can have is bring back the other fund and let's discuss that and figure out what that's for really and where it's going and what we can do to adjust that. But keeping this in there for the catastrophic time that's going to come sooner or later makes me feel more comfortable, as would the residents and the services that we're going to be able to provide for all of them.
That's right, Nancy, but we don't have to change it. We might find that other coastal communities, or the majority of them, are where we are, okay? So that's why I just think it would be, I've always known just Madeira beaches. I've never known any other coastal community and what they do. So that's why I think I would just like to see the work put into it, because we've never had that kind of a study done. And you would do it yourself, right?
Yeah, that would be something that we do.
Okay.
We can entertain that.
Because,
but-
yeah, just to see it, because we really, truly might find out that we are right where we want to be. And that everybody else is, so.
Right.
I'd like to see what it says.
Well, and there's some things that you may want to look at once we bring that policy back, where other communities may say that, you know, that those funds can be utilized as part of a budget appropriation that's through the board to hardened structures to provide capital to shore up some of our, vulnerable areas during a storm event. So there's just some things that I think we would benefit from the analysis. It wouldn't be something that would be too arduous because in our coastal communities, a lot of communities do have some type of policy or some type of situation where they address some of the disaster preparedness. So, but we just want to see if there's an appetite from the board for us to go forth and do the research and bring that back for some more in-depth discussion and conversation on the topic.
I think the consensus is that we would like to do that.
Okay. And just for the board's edification, and this will come at your next meeting, the $452,123, the BP monies, there is no restrictions per se associated with that money. And so as part of our budget discussions, we are going to be looking to bring some projects in the capital budget to effectively utilize some of that money for the purposes of some infrastructure needs and even to address some of the concerns that were communicated as part of the conversation we had with residents at the past, so or businesses at the past. So we're looking to program that out and have some discussions with the board about that at the next meeting.
And we don't have that yet, do we? We don't have that yet, do we?
The monies? Yes, we do have the monies, yeah. Is there, Nick, did I steal your thunder? Is there anything else?
452, that's right.
Good job.
So,
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, next we have the website upgrade and a redesign.
okay. Madam Mayor, members of the board, this item before you this afternoon is to talk about the City of Madeira Beach's website. In the short time that I've been here with the organization, it's been communicated to me by numerous members that sit on this board that there's a desperate need for some improvements in the website, and some of the communication that I've had with the residents and business owners also share those perspectives. So I've reached out and had conversations with our information technology service provider network people, and then we've also engaged a marketing firm to assist us in providing some perspective on some things that we would like to see done here on the website. One of the things that I think the board would appreciate is that the anticipated cost for the overhaul of the website is about $21,000. However, it would be utilized from existing monies that we have in the fiscal year 2018 budget, so it's not like staff is going to be requesting additional appropriations or additional monies. But obviously, as anyone has traveled our website, there is a desperate need for an overhaul. There's sections that are obsolete, there's information that's inaccurate, and that's our digital front porch. And so what we wanted to do is work with our partners to be able to provide just a concept and some thoughts on what are some of the issues that we have and how we can effectively rebrand our digital presence. The series of meetings that we would like to have that will be spearheaded by the marketing firm would be community charrette meetings. We would like to go out to the community, talk to folks. What would you like to see the website do? What are the things that you enjoy about Madeira Beach? What are the things that you look for when you visit a website? Where's the areas in which you shop? How do you receive information? Is it on your mobile device? It is on your laptop? Those types of things. So this is going to be a really engaging process. We want to bring the community involved in this process. You, as the policymakers, will have an opportunity to meet with the marketing professionals individually as well as collectively as a group to provide some insight and some perspectives of what your constituents are looking for when they visit our website. So we know that this is a major priority for this board to increase transparency, to increase access to government. And when I met with both the marketing firm as well as network people, I said, our goal is to make it to where people don't have to call City Hall. They could effectively find everything that they're looking for at the click of a button. Now, we would love for them to call City Hall or bring baked goods or whatever trinkets that they would like for staff, but certainly we want to make it an accessible, open, transparent interaction with our residents, and our website is such a major focal point. Network people and Media Garage will kind of tag team this presentation, so you'll hear a little bit about the media component and how our digital presence is so important, and then Network of People will share a little bit about how the project is going to be managed, and then ultimately we're going to end in how security plays a significant role. And I think you're going to be surprised when you see how many cyber attacks and how many things that we have to be mindful of when we do have things out there on the World Wide Web, and that we can have a beautiful, functioning website, but the reality is the more beautiful, more functioning it is, more people that we attract to sit there and try to hack away at our website. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the team, and they're going to go ahead and kick it off.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners, for taking the time to meet with us.
Can you get closer to the mic, please? Mic.
Yep. Okay. We have some paper here. We had some presentations to show you, and we have to bring you some printouts because we're having a little issue with this logging in here. But the purpose of the meeting today is to talk to you about the website, and Karen is the marketing expert here as well, and I'm from Network People on the technology side for the website. So when I talked to the city manager, he has a very strong vision about changing the website, giving it a whole new look, and so we're very excited about that, and I think that teaming up with Karen and her team on the marketing side, the way Karen and I have talked about it is sort of like we'll build a car and then she'll help paint it. And so we want to make sure that the website truly is a destination site. The city manager has a very clear vision for what this looks like and the where he wants it to be. There's very high goals here, so it's planned out to be executed in several phases. And the first phase of that project is to take the current website and literally replace it with a different one that is totally branded properly based on what Karen and her team come to you all with, and then have all the same content but have the navigation where you can really find things. One of the things the city manager told us is that key phrase that says the measure of success is if people are not calling the office all the time, if they can really find what they want. But at the same time, we really want to do the marketing side of it because this is the #1 destination in the county, so the branding and the marketing has to be in place as well. So what we're proposing to do is to put a website together that truly is stunning. It is a beautiful site that everybody can be proud of. The navigation is logical, and all the pictures make sense for what the city has, and get a lot of community involvement with that as well. So we'll walk through some of the steps of that, but I want to hand it over to Karen to talk about some of the ideas of what they're going to be doing for the marketing. And then when she gets done with that, we'll kind of talk about what we're going to do to help with the building of the site as well. So I'll let you do that once we try to do this here.
I might be able to speak loud enough. Madam Mayor, thanks for having us today. What Media Garage would like to do, what we've heard from speaking
Excuse me.
to...
You need either the handheld or the other one.
Because the people at home can't hear you.
Right.
What we would like to do is make sure that, do a discovery of your brand. What is the brand of the city of Madeira Beach? And when I say that and what I mean, it's like if your brand, if the city of Madeira Beach was a person, what's its personality? Is the city of Madeira Beach male or more female? What color would your brand be? So we would talk to your stakeholders as well as council, residents, and business owners and try to get a cohesive look and brand across all your platforms that reviews what your brand truly is. So all your departments would look alike. And my apologies, now we're finally up here on the screen, but a little background on Media Garage Group. We are a full-service boutique ad agency. We are experts in creative strategy, media placement, branding and graphic design, copywriting, content development, so we will help write the site, make sure the site is written with search engine optimization and tag words so people can easily find what they're looking for on the site, as well as we're very proficient in photo and video production. Here's some of our clients that we have here locally. We sans payment or in kind help out the Veterans Boat Parade. We've done that the last 3 years. Thank you for your participation as the title sponsor. We also work with other brands here locally, St. Petersburg College, as well as the Orioles in Sarasota for their spring training. We're very good at event marketing, so we would make sure your event page on your website is up to date, and as things happen and occur, the calendar is easily read and managed. Just some basic tips on, why a good website matters. As Hunt was saying, you need to have intuitive navigation, logical information. It needs to be clean. A nice modern design, loading fast is really, really important. I had mentioned well written, so your search engine, it's very friendly with content. There's a few stats we have here. 75% of users admit to making judgments about a company's credibility based on their website design. The little small thing called Google has really changed how people look and research. It's not like Encyclopedia Britannica anymore. It's not hard. Everything is at a click of a finger in the palm of your hand. So people are constantly looking and researching and reviewing ratings. 75% of people expect a consistent experience across social media, that's mobile and in person. In addition, 78% of travelers said informative content from destinations or travel brands can influence their decision-making process. So people are looking at your website before they decide to potentially move here, vacation here, invest their business in here, which obviously increases your economic development. Discovery, I had mentioned we would talk to the community leaders, your local residents, and businesses. Again, I previously mentioned we talk about what is the Madeira Beach brand. Is it currently reflected in your marketing materials? And we need a unified look across all of your different departments. Our next step would be to review your current City of Madeira Beach brand. Again, do some brand discovery. What makes Madeira Beach, what makes the City of Madeira Beach, the City of Madeira Beach, and have a cohesive brand across all city department communication materials. And with that, I'm going to pass it back on to Hunt. Thank you.
So behind you, there's a couple screenshots, and this is one of the things when we're talking to the city manager. These are just some of the examples of good city websites that have beautiful landing pages that are very inviting. So what we really want to do here is really set the bar high. We want a stunning online presence. We want beautiful pictures, clear navigation. I know I'm repeating what Karen was saying, but it is a joint effort, and that really is the mission here. So we want rapid access to information, all the things we've been discussing, and the key is where people don't have to call, it's on the website. Another thing about this is when I've met with your leaders like Walt and the other department heads, they're very passionate about their departments. They're very passionate about what they want to say about how good their departments are. So a big goal here is to give each department its own unique branding within the overall brand for the city. And so that's part of the overall plan to make sure that everybody has a unique site for the department, but it brands up to the top. From a community point of view, we want everybody to have a true, good, simple way to get information. And it also needs to reflect the professional nature of all the departments and the staff that work here. In addition to that, we want to alert for key events and news updates. So it's kind of sort of a dual purpose. One is to be beautiful and attractive as a marketing brand for new tourists, but also a really effective and beautiful site for the community. So part of that is we want to get the community involved. We want to have contests where they have artists and photographers that provide some of the content that was going to be put up here, and Karen's team is going to be leading that effort, so that when we put this up, there's going to be a true ownership of what the site looks like. Everybody will be proud to send that link to their friends and say, look at this awesome website, and look at our awesome city. So those are the two key driving factors. From a design point of view, there's a very structured way we're going to go through this. It's going to be a true team effort. We are going to meet with each department, make sure we understand their goals, not only from a visual point of view, but what are they trying to do with their department? Because there's a longer term goal as well that says that we want to build on this website. And there's three main phases I'm going to click to over here on the next part of that. So phase one is to quickly, as fast as possible, replace the current website with one that truly is beautiful and has a true foundation for all the future work that's going to happen. Jonathan, when he was talking to us, he gave some very clear direction about wanting all of the systems in the city to be available on site. so that they don't have to call in like we were talking about. So you can literally check on the status of your permit. You can check on the status of a ticket. You can check on anything that you would normally call in for. And that's called a web application. And the idea is that over time, this fundamental first site will then become a true system that your citizens can use. And that's something that a lot of the bigger cities have, and there's no reason we can't have this here as well. So phase one is to put in that first look, give it a bang, get everybody to see that something has changed, get their attention, and build a true foundation that we can just add on to as you start adding the other capability. Phase two, we'll start putting in some of those integrations and much more additional community outreach and activity. I think one of the things Karen said that is key here is that they really are good at marketing events. And this is one of the things Madeira Beach is known for. So there's going to be a lot of work done on the event management, calendar management, publication of those events so that you really get good responses for people showing up, and also make it very easy for them to respond and tell you how cool it was when they did it, because all of that is great content for your website. And then phase three, which is basically to be determined, will come as we move past that point. But the good news is that you all will be able to evaluate this as it goes. We'll be getting feedback from the community to kind of adjust what this is, because the best laid plans are always going to change. But this is a very structured, good way to go about adding layer upon layer to really give the facelift that is needed here with a complete new branding. So that's the general overview on that. Are there any questions?
I got a few. First off, how long would it take to do this?
The first phase is 4 months.
4 months?
Mhm.
Okay. If you are if you go onto the Madeira Beach website and I'm looking for a place to stay, will there be links that people can click on to go to those places, or how would that kind of work?
That's part of what we're going to design, and Karen's team will be doing that, but that's definitely what you want there. You want to promote all your hotels and all your destination spots on the website. You truly want it to be where they go to find everything about the city that's important.
And my last question is, how hard will it be to change it? You know, this is a living, breathing organization, so things change sometimes rapidly, sometimes slowly. So if they go to Department X and there's been some major changes, how hard is it going to be to go into the website for that department or for you guys to change what's there?
I'm glad you asked that, because one of the foundational items here is to make updating easy. The only way a website stays fresh is if it's constantly changing with fresh information. And so one of the things I've heard from staff here is that it's very frustrating sometimes when they want to do something simple like that. So part of the design from the ground up is going to be having each department have the ability to go in and make a lot of their own changes, and then only call us in if it's more heavy duty. But we're going to give them the tools and the mechanism to be able to update as much as they need to and as often as possible, so they truly have control of their site. It includes, go ahead.
I had one last question. One of the things I hear from my constituents is that I get on the website and I can't navigate it. I can't get to this, you know. And for people, including myself, who's, you know, challenged, very much challenged, how hard will it be, you know, if I go into Department A and I want to find out something, a good example, let's say I go into the city clerks and I'm trying to find out about an ordinance, or I'm trying to find, how hard is it going to be for them or myself to navigate through the website?
So that is the fundamental question, and it is very difficult to make navigation easy. You know, there's an old phrase that said, "Forgive me the length of my paragraph. If I had more time, I would have written less." That's kind of what we're talking about here. If you go to some of the sites that are very popular, even that look great in the front, once you get past that front, it's hard to find things. And part of the problem is there's a lot of information here. So part of the trick here is going to be partnering with companies that specialize, especially with government information, that there's a lot of, to help you find it. So Walt, for example, has a company he's looking at to help with putting up some of his financials to make it easy to navigate. So this is not a one-shot does all. We're looking at the best of breed wherever it is to bring it into that website to help with that navigation. So for example, on the clerk side, there are sites and services that specialize in putting minutes in that are easy to search and easy to find. So we're going to look at all of those with staff and make a decision whether we want to do it ourselves, which is certainly an option, or if there's a system they really like that gives them a lot of bells and whistles, we'll add that in as well. But the foundational thing we're looking at with every decision is going to be, can we find this thing, and is it easy to navigate? Because that's the problem we have right now. So that is the goal, and to your point, it will change. We're going to put it up there. The city manager has asked for a lot of analytics. We want to say, okay, which path did they go? And this is more Karen's area, so she's the expert at this. But the idea is you put up a phrase or you put up a link and you track. Then you change the way you put up the phrase and the link and you track. And you say, you know what, when we switch to this wording, we got a whole lot of hits. So we're going to start changing that. So it's a constant reviewing in the background of what's happening and where people are clicking. And again, Jonathan has a lot of experience here. And I must say that I want to take a little time and say that without somebody like Jonathan who's driving this, has the vision for it and the passion for it, projects like this often fail because this is a big project. This is a big deal. You're like a very large company. And it's his passion and direction with direction to staff that has really got me excited that this thing is going to take off and do well. So we're going to be looking at all of that, but my answer to you is it's not nailed down. That's part of the process of this project is to try these things out, and we're constantly going to be adjusting, but it's going to be beautiful along the way.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just think one of the things about our website now is that you can go into different departments. Nobody is uniform. It looks like the marina is some marina in any town USA, and there's no branding that really puts it with us, or the Parks Department, any department really. And I think that's a huge thing that's going to help bring everybody together on the website in the web world.
You actually have people that have some of the departments have put up their own website to try to fix that. So we've talked about that. So you're going to have that overall branding, and then each department is going to have very unique branding. So because you want that, but you're going to know it is part of the city.
But you still know you are in the city of the Madeira Beach webpage.
The example I give is if you go into Macy's, no matter what department you go in within that store, and they're all unique, you know you're in Macy's. That's what we want for you guys. It's going to be, I always know where I am, and it's always beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just have a comment and a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On our website, it's even hard to find the search button or the search thing. And that needs to stand out. You want to be able to...
That's on the list. That's one of the things that even I'm looking at. Where's the search button? So yeah, it's going to be awesome.
And the other thing is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It seems like right now, sometimes we can't get things on the website fast enough. That's my concern, that we can, that we can get it out there right away.
That's right. That is the driving factor, is that when I talked about being easy to make modifications, it's that sort of thing. If you have announcements, if you have minutes, if you have feedback, we want that to be the driving factor. That's one of the top 3 directives.
Thanks.
Okay.
You said it's going to take 4 months to complete the website. Is this something that you do in phases, or you take the whole website down and just put a whole new one up?
So the cool thing is, unlike a building when you're waiting to go in, we can set up what's called a sandbox. So we'll actually be having the website developed in a secret place, but it's building the new building. And you all will be able to see parts of that when Jonathan is ready to show it to you, and nobody else will know it's there. And you'll be able to see the entire thing until everybody's holding hands and say, let's go. It stays that way. And once you're ready, you hit the switch, and the next time somebody goes to City of Madeira Beach domain, ups the new website.
Okay.
So you'll be able to see that, and we'll make sure that you guys are absolutely in the loop.
We'll build a lot of excitement socially through your social channels, and it's coming in 2 more days and 3 more days, so people are going to be looking for it.
All right, thank you.
So we'll have a whole campaign based on the launch and all the hard work that you guys are going to participate in to make this happen.
We'll be our own advertising agency.
Yes.
Right.
Share.
Yeah. And Madam Mayor, one of the things that's certainly very important is that we don't build a website that is, made for millennials, and it was communicated. It's going to be something that when we have those focus groups and we meet with our bridge players, or we meet with our folks that participate in our Little League program, there's going to be those conversations that we look and understand the dynamics of our community, and we make sure that, the font sizes, the search engines, things are easily accessible. We're not going to, when we're talking about stormwater, we're not going to call it environmental services or things. We're going to call it stormwater. We're going to utilize, we're not going to call it refuge. We'll call it trash. We're going to utilize regular terminology so anybody from across the country or across the world, from that matter, can find what they're looking for. And that's something that traditionally, governments get in a situation that, you have environmental services, and then you got to dig in environmental service, and then, that's water, sewer, and stormwater. Well, then what is stormwater? And so we're going to really break down the walls of government and really invite the public in to be a website that they're comfortable navigating and that we're comfortable in putting information out there, and it's real time, you know. So we're looking forward to the project. The next step, if the board is amenable to moving forward in such an action, is we will define the scope and responsibilities from both our partners, and then we would look to bring that before the board for your approval, and then starting the process. We definitely want to get this done and launch it before the start of the fiscal year, kind of an opportunity to rebrand and show that beautiful website that we've all been waiting for. So.
Are we going to have the ability to update, like Maggie was talking about, update the information from here?
Real
We don't
time.
have to go anywhere else? We're going to do it from here.
We don't have it, and that public information position, that's their responsibility, keeping the content fresh, working with department directors, putting all the information out there. So as soon as we get something, if any of the board members has a event or a program that they want to have put up on the website, we should be able to put it on there instantaneously, no lags, nothing. Yep.
I think it's something that's been a long time coming, so I'm excited.
Absolutely.
We'll be bringing it
We
forward.
were thrilled when this one came up, but it still needed a lot of work. We knew that.
Okay. We definitely have, I think, Nate's going to come up, and he's the president of Network People and has been a great partner for the city here. But to talk about the security components of it, and there's going to be an item that's going to be coming before the board for approval for our security components. And obviously, you know, we get all excited about the website, and then, you know, Nate gets to tell us the bad people out there that are trying to do things to, you know, enter into our system anyway. So there's some pretty fascinating data that shows, just because of the foresight this board had to enter into an agreement for service to be able to protect our digital presence and our information, how it's actually made a difference, and we have the numbers to be able to show that. So, Nate, if you want to go ahead and...
Thank you, Jonathan, and Madam Mayor and Commissioners. I'm going to have our Director of IT Security, Elias Leslie, share the first couple of slides, and I'll do the conclusion. Elias?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. They asked me here to discuss the latest improvements and the benefits of those improvements. And as you can see, the first slide is indicative of the hard work that we've been putting forth. You started out with a risk score of roughly 3,100, and it's down to 849 now, which is a reduction of a little over 70%. It's actually about 73%. The items that we're working on for you guys are basically, we're trying to prevent attackers from getting in. We're trying to prevent breaches. And you can see that the items that have been blocked there, the 9,585 intrusions being blocked, that's since we enacted the new security processes and tools, we've been tracking that, watching that over time, and that's the latest since since the months ago that we've enacted those changes. Here's another set of stats: malware blocked, botnets blocked, and spyware blocked. Think of that as malware is just any kind of malicious thing that happens that's trying to get in, a bad piece of program that once you click on it, it turns into ransomware, it turns into a virus or a worm. And same can be said for spyware. Spyware is more related to someone trying to gather information about you, like keyloggers trying to find a password code or something like that, so they can use that password to do something bad with an email account or such.
What's a botnet?
Botnet is a network of computers, bots, that are controlled and used for nefarious purpose. So basically what happens is they infect these computers, thousands of them, and they string them all together as one giant bot or botnet. And then once they've stringed them together, they can use them for bad things like doing a denial of service attack against a website. So they could send 10,000 computers and tell them to access your website all at the same time over and over and over again, which means that no one else can get to your website. Botnets are also used for other purposes like hacking passwords, because they do it over and over again very, very quickly. and try and gather, information such as passwords or secure information, publicly identifiable information, PII, and use that for, to further the attack or breach of a target organization. They're also being used just as a computing resource for many other tasks. So if you think of artificial intelligence, you've probably heard of some of that stuff in the news. AI is being used both maliciously by the bad guys and being used by the good guys to defend. So basically, a botnet can be used as a giant computing resource. Think of it as just like an army of unwilling, usually, computers that are out there that are doing bad things for people. So that's one of the items that we saw was, those sorts of communications back to those sorts of things are being blocked. So you go to the wrong website, it'll trigger one of those 156 that you see there, a bad website that is trying to do something related to a botnet, a program that got installed that is trying to call out to a botnet. You'll see indications like that as well. And now here's the chart that shows, or the slide that shows the agreement progress, the various items that we've been able to install since the inception of the agreement. One of the most important is the ongoing risk assessment that we do periodically, actually almost weekly right now, because it's at the beginning of the process, but eventually monthly and quarterly we'll be updating those and reviewing those. What we do is we have a risk assessment process where we run scans and we see where risk lies within your organization. Excuse me. And once we identify that risk, we do what we have to do in order to prevent that risk. So that might be reaching out to Walt, the security officer, to say, hey, we need to enact some new policies in order to decrease this risk, which is where a lot of that 70% reduction came in. Was by actually reducing that risk through security policy, as well as enabling some new tool sets. And we understand the impact to the users, and we have to be very careful about how we roll that out so we're not creating a security problem while we're trying to fix a security problem. So computer policy management is some of the same. It's a tool set that we use in order to manage the policies on computers to reduce your risk. Security officer training is something that we just completed with Walt. Was it last week? It was last week. It was a busy time. That's a 3-hour-long course where we discuss all the latest security trends and threats, and we actually go through a process where we design a organization-wide security policy that will be used for the entire internal employee staff population of Cedar Madera Beach. Not citizens for the organization of Cedar Madera Beach. So that's something that can help drive security awareness training, which we already accomplished a piece of that initially when we had the issue with the email. We came on site pretty quickly with Corey, and Corey went through a security awareness training that was email focused, that talked about the ins and outs of how to use your email, what kind of phishing attacks that you can expect, and also some new tool sets, such as two-factor authentication at the bottom there, that we're going to be enabling to help protect against this sort of thing in the future. We also have some new tool sets that we've installed that have helped prevent a broad range of malware and ransomware, as well as, and gateway security is also installed and configured. That's a device that sits at your various internet endpoints or internet, points of communication, doorways, and those have been enabled and monitored. And we've seen some of the stats in the previous page were actually based on both the malware and the gateway security. Those are very advantageous in managing and maintaining. One thing I would like to say is with all of these things, it's not just set it and forget. It's not install it and forget. It takes constant vigilance, monitoring, management, reporting and reviewing and working with a security officer such as Walt to make sure that this is not going to impact you guys adversely internally when we enable these sorts of things. And whenever there is an impact that's adverse, we can adjust it so that you still maintain a good amount of security, but we can minimize the items that are impacting your day-to-day. while we roll it out. With that, hand it off to Nate.
All right, thanks, Elias. So that is a good lead into this triangle that we're looking at here, which is called the security triangle. There's 3 points that we think about as we're designing solutions. Security is on the top, ease of use on the bottom left, and functionality on the right. And the perfect point is right in the middle of the triangle. And if we use levers to make your current network too secure before doing training and working with security officer and having policies in place, then that means that ease of use and functionality go away or become very difficult. And so we're navigating that over time. It's a process, and really all of security is a process. IT security can be comparable to using climbing gear. If you were going to climb a mountain, you want to make sure that you have the best gear, and you want to know how to use the gear and train on it often. You don't want to use old ropes and old carabiners. You want to have good ones and maintain those and train and know how to use them. And that's really how we are working with your environment to help make it secure. And as we've seen, getting good tools in place and processes have enabled us to get you to a much lower risk level than you were at before. By the way, no organization is at a zero. That's not possible. Everyone is above zero. Even the Pentagon, even the CIA or the NSA, they're all above zero. They understand there's a risk. I think one of the quotes was the Pentagon was quite happy that it took as long as 8 hours before hackers got in when there was a hack. So everyone has this risk, making it manageable, giving you ease of use and functionality as an organization while we secure the outside doors and monitor what's going on is our goal. So our next key step, and we're going to deploy this in mid-June, is doing a comprehensive security awareness training. So this training goes to each of the employees of the city, and we'll have different customized videos that they watch and will take tests on. That does two things. One, it educates the employees so they can do a better job of being vigilant because security is up to all of us. It's not just one person. It also enables us to document so that there's a paper trail of, yes, we are doing this, and as a city, being responsible for what we should do to keep the data safe. So that will be happening. We're also going to send out test emails that will be a test safe phishing campaign. And that's all on the education side. So we actually send a phishing email out and then watch who opens that and then educate into that. So we talk with employees about, okay, this was not a safe email to open up. And here's why, this is what you should be looking for, so that when you get phishing emails from the wild, you're not susceptible to those. Phishing emails are very, very good now. They're not like the Nigerian prince email that we used to get that everyone knows that, okay, that's not even close to tempting me. Now they're very relevant. Their context is good. And so we use this as a training process, and that'll be documented as well. So those are our next steps in mid-June. You have questions?
Yes. And it's kind of personal. On my city website, I get things blocked. It comes in quarantined all the time. And it's ones that should be able to come through. It's like Florida League of Cities. Every one of their emails is always quarantined to me. Is that, I don't understand why.
It's coming through network people now. The quarantine thing is.
Okay.
Mine is.
Okay.
It also, I think, depends on how that entity is sending it out, because the software picks it up and sees that it's a mass, to a bunch of people all across the state, and so it kind of quarantines it from. So there's a way to effectively go in there and,
I guess when I was looking at it from the point of ease of use versus functionality, and if I'm not getting something, then it's not functional. So I'm trying to figure out, where does the center point, how do I get to that center point?
I'll tell you the truth about email is that it's 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 actually pretty much the most widely used ingress point, the point that people are trying to attack and utilize in order to gain access to a organization's data or systems. So it's a very careful balancing act that we have to walk. Some clients, we can adjust their spam slider, if you will, where it goes all the way to the high security level, and they have no problems with it. Doesn't affect them that much because of the types of communications and the types of organizations they're communicating with, and the fact that they don't deal with a lot of mass marketing sort of emails and things like that. But for corporations or organizations that deal with a large amount of traffic from places that send out mass marketing emails, that can change from day to day, honestly. So what we do is we instruct that we set certain guides, certain levels of spam quarantine so that your security is met. But then as you're working through the issues, essentially we rely on the users to monitor the quarantine daily and say, okay, I accept this, and release and allow, which is where the security awareness training comes in. You don't want to release and allow or click on something that you shouldn't. And honestly, as different sorts of technology comes out and as they improve, there's ways of minimizing the user interaction or choice. It just kind of comes through. But there's always going to be a level of user impact where you have to actually click on something and decide, is this something I was expecting? Is this something I choose to open?
Jump in on that.
I have a question.
And if you can simply call our office, if you know how to create a ticket, we'd be more than happy. If you don't, I'll give you a business card and create a ticket, and we'll show you how to whitelist that email, which means that it's a good email. You recognize that, and it should come through. And if it doesn't, we'll use one of those sliders that Elias talked about to try and get that available.
I just know that not only I had it, I know when Terry was here on the board, he was telling me he had the same problem when we talked about it one day.
I get all this informational
You have the
stuff.
same problem? So.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's an area, an example where it's too far on the security side and it's affecting functionality. We certainly don't want that. So let's make some adjustments together. And if we can start with you, if you don't mind, I'll give you a business card and we'll pursue it and get that handled.
Okay.
Good.
I have a question.
Yes.
Before or at the result of this agreement being enforced now, what did we have before that? Or is that when we saw something in the paper one day that said Madeira Beach got hacked?
So what you had before was what we call an active IT agreement. It's a managed agreement for your computer network. And what that included was a portion of our security wall. And what we've made an analogy to the wall as as if back in the Renaissance area where they were protecting the castle and they would have a wall. And what we found is that the walls of 5 and 10 years ago were simply not high enough.
Right.
And so what we jointly did together in December was enable you tools and processes that make the walls higher, or as my kids would say, give you extra bazookas and moats and tanks to protect your castle. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we have that proper agreement with you. That was just not enough before, but we didn't know that it wasn't enough until we got hacked.
That's correct.
Is that right?
And we have made this effort with every single organization that we're working with. And it's a difficult journey because it's as if we've all been levied in a very expensive tax that we weren't expecting, that we don't particularly enjoy. We don't get a lot of benefit out of it, except that it keeps us safe and keeps people out. And so it's something Network People has had to undergo with our organization and every customer and organization we work with.
Okay, so before, and this might be oversimplifying it because my mind sometimes, I'm not really computer really literate a whole lot, but what it really does, it makes sure that you all do all these different kinds of testings and everything else to where if anything should come up at all, you know it before we know it.
In most cases. So we had an organization that it was a architect firm, and they got ransomware. We learned about the ransomware within an hour, but they learned about it, and they're one of our customers. They called us immediately. It was within 7 minutes of the attack. We had them shut everything down and have the systems off, and only a few thousand files were encrypted. We do good backups. We were able to restore all those files, and there was no harm done. There was no publicity. There was no issue, no notice to their customers because everything was done back. So part of this is a joint effort. Yes, we would have known, but since they were highly aware and we work with them all the time, they told us, and we were able to help and reduce downtime or reduce loss even better. Another example is we had one of the things that's popular now is a hacker will get into an email account, and they'll send everyone on that email account that is in the contact list an email. So be like everyone that you know would get an email from you that would say, you need to change your online email password. So your Yahoo account or your MSN or your Google email account. And it will look very legitimate. It will pop up just like yours pops up, and people will put in their password. So the hacker will then immediately have your email account and your password will go to your account and send the same email to everyone that you know. Everyone that accepts and changes the password goes to everyone that they know. And it's highly effective. 81% of the breaches now happen through email. It was a huge problem 10 years ago, and it's even bigger now.
Right.
So that's why we have to be so vigilant.
That's where the training will come in with staff too,
Yes.
is that they'll be able to recognize and know exactly what to do with it within.
Right. We want them to delete that right away. Yep, good question.
Thank you, thank you.
And one other thing to mention is that there's an industry shift going on right now with security. It's not just us that are dealing with this problem, where we have to basically add new security services, new solutions to these new security trends and problems. We have a lot of peers as well, a lot of partners as well that are dealing with the same issue. It used to be that antivirus and a firewall was enough, and that's all you needed, but that's like 20 years ago. And now things have been changing and changing over time, where we have to tack on these new systems in order to protect us. I read a report that cybercrime is like one of the fastest growing industries that accounts for about $435 billion of lost revenue per year, and that's up 30% since 3 years ago. So that keeps going up and up and up, which is why we have to keep tagging on these new solutions, these new processes. And it's not just a tool, it's a process really, and there's a commitment. We talked about that during the security awareness, security officer training, where you have to have process commitment and communication in order to combat security.
Thank you for your investment and time, and the city manager and Walt have done a great job in working with us. We really enjoy your team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any public comment on that item? Next item is the 137th Avenue update.
Madam Mayor, members of the board, this item before you is the 137th Avenue Circle Stormwater and Roadway Improvements Project. This particular project is a project to address some water quality issues and address some of the much-needed stormwater improvements and roadway improvements on 137th Avenue Circle, Selma Street, and Plymouth Street. Originally, when this particular project came out and the city wanted to proceed forward with such an endeavor, the anticipated project cost was about $935,000. The city did approach the South Florida Water Management District, referred to as SwiftMud, in early 2016 and submitted an application to receive grant fundings for assisting in the project, cooperative funding. The city was successful in securing $467,500 for from the district for the purposes of such a construction project. Obviously, with construction costs increasing and there being a demand for the materials that we would look to effectively utilize in this construction project, the anticipated bid and the anticipated costs were projected to be at about $1 million. We did receive a bid for the project. The lowest and most responsive bid was Steve's Excavating at a little over $1.1 million. Staff is before you this evening to explain a little bit more about the project and to determine if the board is willing to consider putting additional funds to the tune of $352,905 to allow for this project to go forward. Staff's thoughts on this particular matter is that we are seeking direction from the board as to how you would like to proceed. If you are amenable to providing the additional funding, city manager, Al Carrier, who's our engineer of record, as well as our finance director, will put together a funding matrix as to how we will put together the funds to be able to allow for this project to come to fruition. Some of the concerns that we have from the staff standpoint is that in the event that we tell the district that we are not going to proceed forward with such a project, that we will definitely lose the $460,000+. In addition to, we will have further issues trying to obtain additional funding from the Water Management District. If it is the board's pleasure to proceed forward with trying to find the funding to allow for the project to continue, we anticipate it happening in fiscal year 2019, and I will make a personal call to the executive director of the South Florida Water Management District that I know very well and see if there's an opportunity for some additional funding. Now, it will inevitably be a heavy lift, but nonetheless, we're going to ask the question. I will ask that Mr. Carrier get up and explain the importance of this project and kind of bring you up to speed on this particular issue, and then staff stands prepared to answer any questions the board may have.
Good afternoon. Al Carrier with Doolin Associates. We are the engineers and surveyors that started this process for you all back in 2016 with applying for the cooperative funding through SwiftMud. This project is on 137th Avenue Circle, includes Plymouth Street and Salem Street. The purpose of it is to provide water quality treatment. It's very similar to what we did in Bogosiega, where we have the pervious pavement. So we'll be applying the pervious pavement on a majority of the streets throughout 137th Avenue Circle. We will be using asphalt on the front end of the 137th Avenue Circle around the Church by the Sea. Just because I get so much wear and tear, we wanted to keep that a regular asphalt pavement section. But the rest of the neighborhood around the back where all the new homes are, will be getting that pervious concrete. When we originally scoped this project, our estimated cost back in the spring of 2016 was $785,000. We've been seeing about a 15% increase in construction cost over the last 2 or 3 years, which kind of puts it in line with what we have here today. As the city manager mentioned, we have the lowest bid. The project went out to bid this past March and April, and that came in at about $1.1 million. So Steve's Excavating is the lowest bidder. So the reason I'm here before you today is because we had an agreement with SwiftMud, and the price came in higher than what was the original agreement, the district staff, SwiftMud staff, needs to go back before the governing board and have the contract amended to include the additional price in construction. So what I'm asking you all is not for a final decision, but a kind of a head nod. District staff doesn't want to go present this to the governing board and have the contract amended, only to come back and you all say, well, we never wanted to do that in the first place. So if it's something that you're likely to consider, if you can just give me a nod, I can go ahead and reach out to Nancy Norton, who is our contact at the district, to have her go ahead and prepare the agenda item to be heard, I believe, on the 22nd of June, governing board. And that's why I'm here before you today.
Madam Mayor, if I also would add on to the presentation, I will definitely make it a point to attend that meeting as well and to speak favorably of the project in the event the board would like to proceed forward and see if there is a willingness from the board to assist in essence, splitting the $352,000 that we would have to contribute in addition to allow for this project to come to fruition. Also, I would definitely encourage the board to please reach out to members of the governing board to communicate that you are, if you in fact are in favor of the project, that the additional funding from the district would be much appreciated. In the event that we walk away from this project, it still is a project that we would have to do as a city eventually down the road. And if we look to cut out the pervious pavement, and correct me if I'm wrong, we would save about $52,000. And the pervious pavement is one of the most state-of-the-art drainage and infiltration systems that is out there, and it would, in essence, allow us for it would allow for us not to go into a situation where you would have to provide roadway improvements, but you're not putting in curb and gutter, and then you don't have the stormwater infiltration systems to effectively treat that water and to move that water. So pervious pavement would certainly be the most appropriate application in that particular situation. But we did want to see if the board can tentatively provide staff direction that you would be willing to move forward with such an endeavor. The finance director and staff will then start combing through and looking at what other funding options are available, and then bring that back to you, but also try to work with the district to see if there's an opportunity for some additional funding to see this project come to fruition.
I have a question. Well, do we have the money in stormwater fund to pay for this? I don't have a budget in front of me.
As it stands right now, no.
So where are we coming from?
That's why we're asking.
Well, this project, as the city manager indicated, would be an obligation in next year's budget. So as we're developing the 2019 budget.
Right, and for this particular project, I would not recommend all of the funding, all of the monies come out of stormwater, because there's some roadway components into it as well. So it's going to be some layered funding, but we just wanted to see if the board is amenable to looking at what the amount of $352,000, and then Walt and I will get in and drill down to the specific accounts, because we are going to have to get very specific, because there is not, in essence, that lump sum of money available to say, okay, we're going to pull it exclusively from here.
And any money that we set aside in a particular account, particularly in capital, could roll over.
Yeah.
As you probably recall, in October, I went to the commission and we did a resolution of rolling over balances, and one of those balances rolled over were stormwater accounts.
And we anticipate there to be some savings this fiscal year from monies that we would look to roll over as well. So we were just confirming with the department directors today as far as what projects are in the hopper, and based on the preliminary conversations, there is money that we believe we can roll over from fiscal year 18 to 19 to help assist in the funding of this project. One of the components, and Al, if you can hit on that, is the environmental impacts associated with this project, because I think that's very important as to why this project is an important project for us to consider to undertake as a city.
Sure. So the cooperative funding initiative through SWIFMUD for projects like this is primarily water quality treatment. SWIFMUD will pay for the component if it's a baffle box or the impervious pavement. In this particular project, they'll also pay for the curbing to contain that water. They'll pay for the removal of the old system, which is the roadway. All those components you can apply for the cooperative funding for those components of the project. Typically, the issue here is when we apply for this type of project, we're competing against everything else that's in the district, everything from Citrus County all the way down to Sarasota County. So they may be able to have this huge farmland, and they can treat all that farm with building a small pond, and the cost-benefit analysis for them to do that is very low. For us to build in an urban environment, it's very high. So when this project got ranked, it was ranked medium low, meaning there was a number of projects above it. I think that year there's somewhere around 100 projects. We're ranked in probably, I think, the bottom 2 or 3. The governing board has so much money that they can spend, and they strike that line. And we happen to be above that line by a couple of projects. So what that tells me is we're getting a lot of bang, on our end, we're getting a lot of bang for our buck. The cost to remove the nutrients is very high because we're in an urban area. Swift mud, from what we've seen the last cycle, where we've worked with other municipalities, that line that the district is, or the board is drawing is higher. So a lot of the small municipalities like you all are not getting funding for projects like this. They're asking those communities, they'll only fund, like, say, the baffle box and maybe the outfall pipe. They're not considering the collection system to get all the stormwater there, where in this project they are. So I think it's imperative that this might be the last shot, if you will, unless the district at some point in the future decides to change their theology or their way that they can do cost-benefit analysis for highly densely populated communities like this. So going back to what you're referring to is, I think this is the last, I really think this is the last shot for a number of years. If we were to come in and do a similar project, it wouldn't be cooperatively funded. I know that because we tried doing it for Town of Bel Air on a similar project. It didn't get funded this year. So I'd like you all, I'm kind of pleading to you all, I would like you to look really hard to try and find the funds. I know it's a lot of money with what the budget you have, but I think it's very cost benefit to you all, and I think it does a tremendous benefit to the bay. You're collecting all that silt and nutrients. You're collecting it in the roadway. Public Works Group, they have a VATCon truck that's on its way. They're gonna suck all that stuff up from the pervious pavement prior to it to get in the bay, and you're gonna see big benefits in the future.
What level is that street?
Level, like traffic level.
No, like the level that they gave us, how bad are the streets in our city? A couple months ago, they gave us a report on that.
I think that was done by CPWG. We, Doolin Associates, had done the same, similar, about 5 years ago, study of the streets. And generally speaking, your streets are in fairly good condition. My opinion, you have a couple hot spots. One's 137th Avenue Circle, and the other is some of the roads out on Crystal Island. Crystal.
Parsley was rated the worst one. It was poor in the report.
Parsley was?
And it was the only one that was poor, the whole circle. So that's why I was wondering how this one got rated above anybody else and why. And you don't know the rating, so we can't really answer that question.
Are you talking about the way the projects have been rated over the years?
No, I'm talking about the level. So there's no question.
I think this particular project is more so on the stormwater water treatment side versus the pavement master plan and the pavement management schedule. And that's one of the, excuse me, that's one of the things that we are going to look to address as part of the fiscal year 19 budget, is addressing the concerns in Parsley. I think this project got elevated because of the cooperative funding and the treatment process and the water quality improvements, that if this project was to come online, that we would see sizable improvements in the water quality, because what's happening is all the sediment, all the soot, all the vehicle oils, those types of things, and when there is good rainfall, of course, just runs right into, and so there's no place for any stormwater treatment. So this is really, the district is looking at it from a water quality perspective, and that's why it got itself elevated versus, a Parsley. But Parsley is a priority, a major priority for us going into the budget process on our roadway.
Crystal is too, but I mean, it's like everybody drops off the radar unless you say something.
The other component to this was the stormwater collection system. There's 3 outfalls. They're in failing condition. So that was the other thing that drove this project. We had Bogosiega Ave, Bogosiega Drive. We just completed that project. There was the same component with those. The collection system was in horrible condition. So that was another component as compared with the condition of the roadway. So those two factors were taken into consideration. 137th Avenue, like I said, the outfalls are pretty bad. There's one in particular that's failing now, that's in between two homes. The homes are older homes that are built very close together. That drives up the cost for construction because you got to get a contractor to get in there and shore up to save the homes and replace that pipe also. So there's a number of different things going on that drove this project to where it is today.
I think that it'd be a shame to give up that additional money from Swift Mud. And if we can find the appropriate funding, we should go forward with the project.
Is that the consent of the board for staff to identify available funding for this project? And then we can definitely be able to provide at least just a brief staff report as to where we found the funding at the next regular meeting of the board. And then we will also communicate to SwiftMud if it is the board's desires that we are interested, but we're going to see if there's any concession that can be made from the district as it relates to the increase in cost that we've seen associated with this project because of the cost of materials and construction just continuously going up.
Right, because if it went up $352,000 in 2 years since the inception of it, and SwiftMud won't consider, but they might. You're saying they won't consider any of that?
We're already, I think, in the worst case scenario. The answer is no, so it can only improve from here. So I'm going to ask. I know the executive director very well, so I'm going to see if he'd be willing to allow for some type of concessions. And then I'll also try to present to the Board of Governors to see if there's any concession that can be made. Now, obviously, they do it for one. They're conceivably have to do it for others, but we'll definitely see. But from the elected official side, I think you all making phone calls to the folks on the governing board of SwiftMud would be very helpful because they effectively have the opportunity to do that, and they have a lot of money in reserves.
Can I ask another question? Yes. Since we knew that this was going to be on our agenda, I've been walking the entire part of 137th every morning, okay, in my district. I've been walking 137th, and I've been walking all of Bogosiega and my street, 129th, all in the same time. And just from a layman's, and I know you're a good person to answer this, but just from a layman's, I know you are, I look at 137th and I see, for instance, I mean, I know how important the environmental issue is, but I'm looking at the traffic issue. You know, there's like, it's the cleanest one, it's the cleanest of all the three areas, to me. I know it doesn't have curbs, and it's only got those 3 storm drains, you know, that are rather small, but they've really been cleaned. I mean, it looks like they've really been taken care of outwardly, okay, on that 137th circle. So just tell me, and like I said, I understand the environmental thing, but if the street is in such good, if the asphalt is in such good condition, then there's just no other options to, I know that it doesn't have the curbs like 129th, but for instance, 129th, and I've even noticed it on Bogosiega, some of those curbings already look kind of bad.
Kind of beat up.
Yeah, I mean, they really are. They're really kind of beat up. And then, I mean, my street I know has been there for several years, but on Bogosiega, it's crumbling in places. So yeah, are there any other options?
Yeah, so I'd like to know where the roadway's crumbling.
Okay, I'll show you.
Please,
I'll tell
because
you.
we're still under warranty with the contractor.
Okay.
And so we need to address that ASAP.
There's a lot of places on Bocasiega with cracks and crumbling.
Have you
I
noticed?
walked
Yeah,
down in
there's-
there too.
It's been, we did a final walkthrough, I guess it was about Christmas time when they finished up, but I haven't been out there since.
Okay, I just did it
I
this
have.
morning. I do
It's
it every morning
bad.
just about.
You could send those locations to city manager, we'll definitely look at that.
We'll go out on site and just kind of survey the area.
I was just curious though, was there any, in light of all that, okay, in light of the fact that 137th just looks clean for the average person, okay? And yeah, are there any options other than that total job?
So to meet the SwiftMud criteria, to get the cost-benefit analysis of the nutrient removal, there's other things you can do, like I mentioned baffle boxes. And if you drive down Bogosiega, On the areas that we don't have the pervious concrete, where we just have the regular asphalt sections, we put in baffle boxes to collect the sediment.
Oh, yeah, okay. Those are the big
But-
things, right?
Right.
Right.
The issue is, it goes back to the cost to remove a pound of nutrients and the ability that that baffle box has deficiency. So the impervious concrete removes certain nutrients. It's very, very good. It's about 95, 98% removal efficiency. The baffle boxes are somewhere around, depending on the nutrient, somewhere around 50 to 75%. So for the 137th Avenue Circle, if we were to put baffle boxes in there, we wouldn't meet the criteria of the removal efficiency from swift mud, and we wouldn't get cooperatively funded. So the pervious concrete out there is the best option that we have. The other thing is it's so low out there, it's another low street, that it inhibits the amount of removal you can get from the baffle boxes, because if streets are too low, high tides come in, inundate the baffle boxes, and then when a tide goes out, it takes the nutrients with it. So you lose that capture too.
Thank you. You made it sound right, yeah. Thank you.
I've got a couple questions. Did this go before the bid committee?
I was not here at the time when this particular project was bid out or what have you.
Because looking at the second page, it says attachments, mandatory pre-bid sign-in sheets, which I have none of those attached. I don't have any of this information.
Did you?
So I'm just trying to figure out, if, it says here they're the lowest bidder, but once again, did it go before a bid committee or somebody just decided this was?
I do not know if it went before the bid committee, but I know two of the members of the bid committee were at the bid opening for the project.
It shows the bid tabulation.
Yeah, we have the bid
Steve's
tabs.
Excavating, MTM Contractors, Camming and Rude Roads, and Gibbs
Yeah.
and Register Inc.
Did you get attachments? Oh,
didn't get
I didn't get
any
attachments.
I didn't get anything either.
I got 2 pieces of
Can
paper.
I just pass them along?
Yeah, I've got the attachments as well.
How did you get attachments?
I don't know.
She knows somebody.
I'm not gonna sit here and read it right now, but make a copy of it.
Please, give me a minute. Thank you. You don't have to do it right this second.
Stay.
That was my question.
That's it?
Yeah. Apparently, we don't have any real answers yet, but, okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If the board will be so inclined to provide staff with direction as to how you would like to proceed, so we can contact Swift Mud and then begin the necessary process if that's the desires of the board.
Can I bring up one more thing on this before we kind of give you direction on how to move? Isn't this the type of things that should be handled by impact fees? People building back there and getting impact fees and stuff like that?
What is that?
Huh?
We're redoing the street. Oh, yeah, I got you now. Okay.
But that's why, and we don't have the impact fees yet, or we're not up to where we should be. Am I correct, Mr. City Manager?
We're not where we should be, but I don't know if this particular project would be one that would be considered would be able to fund the impact. You'd get some impact fees, but I don't think it would be to the
He's
tune.
probably referring to the 5 new houses that got built back there, there's 5 or 6.
There's more than 5, there's 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Okay, 9 or
Yeah.
10 houses on that, where the fish place used to be.
Deep sea,
So,
yeah, deep sea.
Right, and then if they're paying impact fees, that money could go towards something like this. I know it's after the fact now, but I'm just saying in the future, that's what we need to be looking at, so, these type of things are being considered with the impact fees.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Madam Mayor.
So, Mr. Evans,
Certainly.
Mr. Evans, you're going to go ahead and try and
Can you wait
contact
1 minute?
for the additional funding on this?
Yes,
amount?
yes, I am certainly, if the board is inclined in supporting the staff moving forward, I would certainly make it a point to reach out to the district as well as the district executive director, as well as have an opportunity to present before the board to discuss, the city of Madeira Beach's desires to participate in the project and to fund the project, but some additional assistance from the Water Management District would be extremely helpful.
Okay.
I think it needs to be done. I was just trying to figure out, Ms. Weinstein brought up, about, it went up so high, and if we had, and that's why I asked about the impact fees, things like that would be possibly covered.
Well, and another thing is, significant time has lapsed since this project. So had we gotten to it sooner, we probably would have not found ourselves in this situation. So, with these predicaments, obviously speed is important for sure.
But then another project would have suffered because of the time.
Could be. Okay.
Could have been Rick's place.
So we do have a consensus then?
Yes.
Yes.
Steve, do you want to, okay.
You don't have
All right,
any
we'll take a
cheaper.
5-minute break then?
Well, it's always something, isn't it?
reconvened at 5 PM. Talk fast. Next, we have the Charter Review Committee direction.
Madam Mayor, members of the board, this item before you this evening is to seek direction from the board as to how you would like for the Charter Review Committee to review components of the charter. In conversations with the Charter Review Committee, there was some discussions about would the board be amenable to the Charter Review Committee looking at the entire charter, looking at sections of the charter, and how the board wishes the committee to operate. Certainly, they want to address the direction of the board. If there is particular sections or provisions of the charter that the board wishes for the Charter Review Committee to look at, they certainly would make that a priority. So this item is just to provide direction to the Charter Review Committee as to how you would like them to proceed. But one of the things that we as staff want to be mindful of is that there is some limitation on ballot language, that if we do bring some changes to the charter, we're limited to the amount of words that we can utilize to explain what effectively is occurring. In the other side, I think it is prudent for us to provide the Charter Review Committee with legal counsel as they go through components of the charter, because the charter, in essence, is our constitution, is the local law of our community, and having somebody with that expertise would undoubtedly be very helpful to be able to provide and even draft the proposed ballot language and the layperson's interpretation of what that ballot language will effectuate in the event that the board or the voters vote on it. So staff is really looking for your guidance to provide to the Charter Review Committee on how you would like them to proceed. If it is something that the board wishes the Charter Review Committee to review the entire charter and start from page 1 to the last page, they can certainly do that. And then this will be something that will be an ongoing process until you complete the entire charter review. But we want to be mindful also that you probably don't want to put more than 3 to 4 questions on the ballot, because you run the risk of having voter fatigue, that people will not answer certain questions and will not give you the intended outcome you're looking for. So this item is really to get some direction and some clarity from the board, and then we will provide that clarity and that direction to the Charter Review Committee. And their next meeting is scheduled for Friday, May 31st at 1 p.m. So at this time, staff stands prepared to answer any questions and provide any insights from the conversations that we've had with board members.
Does the Charter Committee, do they have a specific portion they want to deal with? I mean, do they have a recommendation?
The Charter Review Committee was basically taking the stance of, and the deputy clerk can provide some additional insight if I can't provide the answer that the board's looking for. But they were, in essence, going to work through the entire charter. That was the things that they were going to do. And in our conversations, I said, well, we should really get clarification from the board, because there may be sections that you would like them to look at. For instance, municipal borrowing, financial procedures, zoning and planning. There may be those specific sections that are key issues that you'd like to see elevated and ultimately addressed, and then being ultimately presented to your voters for a decision. So they were going to work cover to cover. They can still work cover to cover, but if there is certain sections that you want them to prioritize and look at first, then they can certainly do that.
Where this kind of came from is this got brought up to me on the campaign trail. And people wanted to have their voice heard, and they know how archaic sections of this are. So my thought was to just start first section, go through it, tighten it up. There's places in it where it says, it has to be done within 7 days. Well, is that 7 business days, 7 days, calendar days? Tighten things like that up so that there's no question as to how long the time frame is that you have to perform a particular task or whatever. It was things like that, and then some things are mentioned in here, like in one section, but then it's referenced in another section, and it's not exactly the same verbiage or whatever. And those are the kind of things that people were looking at when we were talking about doing this.
I feel like I read through the charter several times, and I really think that it'd probably be beneficial for them to do a little bit at a time and do a good job on it, and complete it, and then move on to the next, instead of trying to do everything all at one time, because there's things that could be skipped, missed. Things might come up where there's additional questions on that maybe we ought to change and look at again. Instead of trying to do the whole thing all at one time, then going back and do the whole thing again the second time or the third time, the fourth time, just pick out a section, do a section at a time, perfect it, then move on to the next, instead of trying to do it all at one time.
Right. I agree.
You know, there's a lot of stuff in here. When the lady came from Florida League of Cities, she said, there's charters out there that are only 6 and 7 pages long. We've got a book. You know? What's in there that we don't need? What's in there that is really controlled by, you know, the state or the county, or an ordinance that we could eliminate out of it? And then things do we need to add, because we talked about this at the meeting, was can we add our vision statement? Can we add our mission statement to it and make that part of our charter and our
Yeah, but that changes with commissions.
But you can always update this.
Yeah, but you have to go,
But you have to
have the
that's right.
public
Voters.
vote on changing something in the charter. So why would you put a vision statement in that the next commission might want to change, and then they got to put it on as a referendum?
That's a good point.
You know, I mean, something that close together. This is supposed to be more of a long-term guideline thing.
Okay, but there's other things in here, like you said, that, you know, are outdated or overstated.
Or stated several times.
Yeah, and I think if they work on it a little bit at a time, so, because like Nancy just said, it has to be voted on, that I don't want to have voter fatigue at the ballot box. You know, I'd like to have maybe 2, 3, 4 things at most, you know, and then let them move on. Hey, I want to eliminate this, or I want to add this, or change this, or whatever the case may be. That's my way of looking at it. And in regards to what section do we want to look at first, I don't know if there's a section that's,
Section 1.
you know, should have a higher priority than another section. You know, I really don't. I kind of think, like Ms. Hodges said, you know, I've read it so many times, and, you know, it's crazy.
Well, and I can tell you from my experience in going through these charter review processes, sometimes you see situations whereby the board may say, you know, borrowing, that has been something that they've heard and there's concerns about it, or the municipal election proceeding and the qualifying period and all that. So I've seen situations whereby, you know, elected bodies have pulled on certain things, but I do have to say, with Commissioner Hodges' point, I think saying, okay, for this particular ballot that we know the election's coming up in March, we're going to look to put 3 or 4 questions on there, and let's take it from section 1 to section 4 and then look at those and make a determination. But this is a committee that conceivably I can see that it can be in existence for a year or so until they make their way through the charter front to back, and that you're going to get a better end product, and there's continuity on the board, as opposed to if we do it this year and then, you know, 10 years down the road when we're required to go through it again, it's a whole different set of folks. If you kind of work it, you have that continuity of folks looking at your charter and addressing it with the same thought process and mindset, and when it's all done, you get a better end product. So if it is the board's pleasure.
Are we better, you know, taking something like municipal borrowing and taking that out of the charter and putting it into an ordinance? You know, and I guess what I'm looking for is their recommendation back to us saying, hey, we think this would be much better if it was an ordinance, because if we have to change it, it's much easier to change than changing the charter. You know, that's kind of what I'm...
Right, does this really make sense in this day and age, in the 21st century? I mean, this was written, what, in 1950?
1947.
40, well, probably a couple of years after,
Probably a couple
but you
years
know,
after.
1950s, and it's like, are a lot of these things even relevant compared to, like John said, putting it in an ordinance and make it where it can be changed? But it's not something that takes any thing away from the public, like the one that they did a few years ago when they wanted us to give up selling our land versus, you know, letting the city just sell it, and the public didn't have any say in that anymore.
Right.
I think that's very important that that stays in the charter, that it is that way.
Yeah, I think that's why this problem
Right,
thing was
but
all
he's
brought up.
like, the municipal, what was it, the spending?
Borrowing.
Municipal
Yeah.
borrowing, you know, you can do that more in an ordinance,
yeah.
because it doesn't really take anything away from the public, saying that, because they really don't have anything to do with the borrowing of whatever. You know, what, it's,
I had 4 specific, I mean, I read it too. I read it like 2 or 3 times, and I kept thinking, maybe I'm missing something, because I understood most of it, but I did have 4 specific things, I guess, that I thought were important for them to look at it, instead of, you know, instant, look at all these. But I only had 4 that were really specific that I thought that maybe they could be started on instead
Like
of
what?
1, 2, 3, and 4. You want me to go over?
yeah, why not?
Okay. Okay, go to Article 6, Section 6.1. Article 6, Section 6.1. It's Charter Officers, Administrative Departments, and Civil Service Commission. It's on, oh, I don't have pages, so you just have to find Article 6, Section 6.1. And it says, there shall be appointed a city clerk, city attorney, and city treasurer, who shall serve at the pleasure of the Board of Commissioners, and said officers shall be considered charter officers. So I guess my only point there is the term city treasurer is kind of archaic.
Right, but in this, just is to kind of go along with that thought, right before it is section 5 under city manager. He's not even considered a charter officer
I'm not there. I know, I'm not there.
in this, yet on the sign out front, he's a charter officer.
I've got that written down, and I think that
You
was
know,
one.
Well, and.
But
and-
That's the kind of things they need to tighten up in.
Yeah, in section 6.4, it says, "There shall be a director of finance, who in turn shall be the city treasurer. Director of finance shall be appointed by the city manager and subject to the Board of Commissioners' approval." So in some cases, you have situations whereby the manager hires, fires, appoints, those kind of things, and then you have the city treasurer's position that is kind of free-flowing and in multiple sections. So I do concur with the board's perspective that there's a lot of things that can be resolved by taking out, putting in ordinance or resolution format, and really hitting on some of the major components of the form of government, the roles and responsibility, the elections, the districts, those kind of things, and allow for the board to have more flexibility by ordinance to make public policy decisions. But I certainly think a pragmatic and systematic approach is certainly a good approach, because this thing needs to be looked at from multiple avenues, because there is conflicting language.
Right, so, I mean, but that's just it, start the first one. Does this chapter make sense? Does this section make sense? And what's in it, does it make sense? And is it applicable today? You know, and I think that's what they really need to look at it and trying to move it forward.
Well, and I think having, another point is having an attorney to work with the staff liaison, who's the city clerk, is important, because there's things in employment law that, you know, are no longer, there's sections here that are no longer needed, or they can say, well, they're protected under this law, or they're protected under that, so you really don't need to have it in your charter. And then ultimately, when those charter amendments are presented to the board, they can be discussed with legal, and you can have legal sufficiency in making sure that the ballot information is, or the wording is appropriately, does it make sense, and it just speeds up the process, and you get a better end product as well.
Right, I agree.
So you said starting just from scratch.
If there's certain sections that you
Yeah,
want to point out, we
I
can.
just zeroed in on 4 things, I guess, that I thought were just really critical. But no, those can come up when those particular items are
And if any of the board members have, highlighted any sections that you just have some, area of concern or confusion, or just want them to look at that, we can certainly note that says, Commissioner Weinstein has section 6.1 or 6.3, that these were the comments or remarks, or Commissioner Hodges has these sections that wants the board to, maybe have a little bit more substantive discussion on that particular section, because it is something that you as a board member, for whatever reason, have identified it for it being a priority for the city to consider making some modifications or changes. Because ultimately, it will come back before you, and you as the board will make a determination as to what questions are put on the ballot and what questions are you comfortable with moving forward on, and what ones you're not.
I also think if that committee, and because we're not trying to tell them how to do their job, what they volunteered for was to kind of shoot us up and spit it out, in a better manner. And if they feel more comfortable in doing section 4 before they do section 3, then, I think that's their call. Hey, I think I can get my teeth into this, and that'll help me go on to the next one. I think, I don't want to sit there and tell them you got to do 1, 2, 3, 4. I think they should have the option of looking at what they feel is a priority also and bringing it back to us.
Well, like they said, they want to work, an option was to do it in phases, and that was how that would work.
And maybe we should just submit to you
Yeah.
directly any little questions, and then you could just pass it along to them, and that's their decision as to when they want to review it.
Absolutely, and what we'll do is, on the staff standpoint too, since it seems to be the desire of the board to look at the entire document and for the board to decide what are the priority issues for them, I will also have staff look at the sections in the charter that are applicable to their operations and provide some insight and recommendations to the board to consider. So they have the Board of Commissioners responses, staff's responses, they'll have legal counsel there and the staff liaison, and you'll just get a better end product, and you'll have a document that really works for our community here in the 21st century.
Okay.
So I agree with that.
Okay. All right.
Use different colors.
Next, we have the Reddington, I'm sorry. Oh, yes.
Hi. Steve Kochick, 15301 2nd Street East, Madeira Beach. As you all know, I love the city charter. I love the simplicity of it. That's what amazes me. It's a document that's very simple. One time we were inspecting NYU in New York, and they had just built a new library underneath the street. And I said, wow, it's a pretty nice library. What's in here? And, oh, these are legal books. I said, wow, legal books, yeah. For New York State, just. We started with 10 commandments, and that was supposed to be the laws for man. That would govern everything. If you follow those 10 commandments, you really can't go wrong. Everything from legal, now it's legal, is based on those 10 commandments, simplicity. That's what our city charter has. When I hear people that want to change the charter, I start to get nervous. I start to get worried, because it's so simple in the way that it does it. It's a basis to start things. When we go into ordinances, where would you look for your ordinances to find them at all? Now it's very simple. It's a couple of pages, and it deals with every part of our government. Very simplistic and very to the point of how to basically start your conversation and go from there. So when we're going to make any changes to this, if you don't understand the basic concept of the charter, how can you change it? Are you making it better, or is it just for the sake of change? Because that's the key to it. If something is simple and it works, why do you want to change it? It explains everything in short detail. You just ran into a couple of months ago where the city charter made a very simple statement that you cannot appoint the finance director and you cannot create a position. Very simple. The charter was there. This City attorney was a different city attorney. He said, no, you can go ahead and do it. And how many problems did that cause? It was a simple thing. And it was the city attorney that got us in trouble when there was a vote taken. And it ended up that we lost the commissioner that the commission had appointed because the city attorney made a mistake on how to run the ballot, that you couldn't take the ballot home. You had to stay here, and you had to vote right then and there. The idea of if the city charter, if you want to look at it, and you want to look at things that may be antiquated now, that's fine. That's something maybe to bring it up to date. But just to change things because you think you have a better way, that's going to be very difficult. Because then you got to prove to me that what's in there is not good enough now, that you've made it better. And that you're going to have a very difficult time doing because of the simplicity of the statement. And when you read the city charter, there's two words that are very, very important. I'll be finished in 30 seconds. There's two words that are very important when you read this. The word shall and the word may. And the city attorney, I'm sure, will back me up on this. When the city charter says shall, that means you shall. Thou shalt not kill. And when it says may, that's when you have flexibility. It doesn't say you may not kill. So please, with the city charter, be very, very careful, because I will fight you tooth and nail unless it's really something good we can agree to. If it's just for the sake of change, for someone's own personal benefit, let's move forward.
Any more public comment? All right, then, we have the Readington Fire Services contract.
Madam Mayor, if I can have Fire Chief Darrell O'Neill present this particular item to you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Just wanted to give you an update. Our fire contract is something that we share with our neighbors there in all three of the Readington communities. And it's a contract that was actually signed back before I ever came to the city. It was a 10-year contract with a 10-year renewal clause. Well, those are coming up for renewal. So that's the question. The contract currently specifies that we'll provide fire protection there, and that cost that they pay to us is actually split 50-50 between us and the city of Seminole. So we get about $243,000 as far as our portion of that. And we're basically just giving you an update and letting you know what's going on with those contracts and letting you know that we are processing those. And we're always looking for ways to work more effectively and efficiently within our system. But those contracts are coming due, and we will be bringing those forward to you in the near future.
Madam Mayor, if I may add on to Chief O'Neill's remarks, we have begun having contracts with the mayors of the Readington communities to communicate our desires to continue to be the fire service provider in those communities. And they're also having the same types of conversations with Seminole. One of the things that staff has done some research, because I asked the question about the amount in which the communities pay, is that a fair and appropriate amount? And in my conversations with Chief O'Neill, and you can ask him yourself as well, is I said, did we incur any additional cost, or do we fund or subsidize the service agreements that are currently in place? Did we staff up? Did we acquire new apparatus, etc.? And in my conversations with the chief, we have not done that. So the level of service, the apparatus, the equipment, the folks that we have on board are the folks that we would have to be able to provide services here in the city of Madeira Beach. So the monies that we have collected over those years have assisted in offsetting the cost for fire service for the system that we have in place, where we assist the Readingtons and the city of Madeira Beach. However, one of the things that I did ask the chief is how did we come up to how do we know what the number is or the cost for providing services to our residents, and is there a scientific methodology or documentation that effectively says, you know, here's the breakdown? No, there's not a document that's in place. And so it would be my recommendation as part of the fiscal year 2019 budget that we really do an analysis to make sure that we look at the cost to provide fire suppression services, and that we also find out the costs similar to that of the sheriff's department that say, here is the cost per square mile, here's the cost for vehicles, insurance, all those different things, so we can get a good understanding of what those costs are, so we can then have a better number to provide to potential contract, communities, as well as an understanding of what it costs for us to provide fire suppression and EMS services throughout the county. We're also going to reach out to Pinellas County about the possibility of some funding in the event that some of the arrangements change, and seeing that we may find ourselves in a situation where we could be the exclusive provider, but it really is contingent on what the mayors of those communities and what the city of Seminole is interested in doing as it relates to fire suppression services to the Reddington communities. But nonetheless, we're staying prepared and eager to assist them, but ultimately finding out what the cost for service is so we can be able to provide you, the policymakers, the information so you can be able to inform your constituents and know exactly the cost of fire service here in the city of Madeira Beach and any other contracted out entities as well.
This has been $250,000 for the past 20 years. And I mean, obviously, our costs have increased exponentially because of everything here, but you just said we got $250,000? It says right here, the amount is divided evenly between us and Seminole.
Right. We get half that amount. The
Right,
full
so
amount
we're
in
only
round
getting
numbers.
half of 250,000, we're getting 125,000.
No, ma'am. The total amount that they pay is, in round numbers, $500,000.
Okay, so we both get it. So in all that, are you talking to Seminole in doing the same type of study about what their costs actually are?
We're not looking at engaging Seminole in the study because the type of apparatus and things that they have, because what will have to happen is we would have to, two things, we'd have to extract the cost for fire suppression services, and then we'd have to extract the cost for EMS services. And in Seminole, we would have to look at their debt service, we would have to look at all the other components. What do they have? What type of vehicles they have?
I wasn't talking about us actually looking at them. Is Seminole going to look at themselves to see, are they just going to accept the 250 from them and move on? I mean, we've done this for so long. I said back in 2007 or 8 that we needed to look at the contract back then and do something.
I don't know, and I can't speak for Seminole if they're going to do it, but I know at minimum we should do it to be able to provide real time and real information on what the cost is for fire services here in Madeira Beach. And I think it would be fiscally prudent for them to consider to do the same as well. But we know that a majority of our calls in the Reddington communities are not fire related, they're EMS related. And so as part of the budget process, we're looking at some alternatives to provide better service in our community, but also that can reduce the cost for wear and tear on our larger apparatus that we have to respond to that community on. But that's something that we'll discuss in more detail with the board.
But in improving that type of service, I think they need to be held accountable for that as well. I mean, because, well, it's like the truck you were telling me about or whatever, then that's going to increase their time. I mean, not increase it, it's going to make it better for them, the whole process, not taking a fire truck up there for an EMS call.
Well, and that's something that we can certainly discuss in more details, but I know in conversations that we had, the communities have said that Madeira Beach, you've been providing the service, but there's not something tangible that we can hold on and say that we've had to increase because of these existing agreements. So we've been paying the $250,000, and you haven't said that this unit is dedicated exclusively for my community. So conceivably, can you ask for a request when we've been paying $250,000 for 20 years? And so that's going to be the counter argument, but we're trying to be able to massage that and work our way into an arrangement. And, we have some additional conversations with the local mayors, and we'll see where this comes back. But ultimately, it will come back to the board, and it may come back to the board sooner rather than later. It may even necessitate a special meeting in the event that we have to get a contract before you for consideration. So this was just an update. It's on the horizon. We're starting the conversation. There's a couple of other key players, Pinellas Suncoast, Seminole, and us, and so we'll see kind of where the communities wind up as who's going to be the service provider, and we would hope that at minimum it would be us and Seminole, but we're prepared. And with the funding, if for whatever reason Seminole was to back out of the arrangement, we're prepared to be able to assist, but there would be adequate funding to fund the station to be able to provide services to that community exclusively, but that's a bigger conversation once we get more data and information.
Okay. Thank you.
Couple questions. Nancy, I think, kind of said it wrong. The 250,000 or 246,000, that was just money we took in 2018, correct?
We pretty much get that same amount every year
Yeah,
for the
okay.
past 20 years.
Basically 250,000 a year, every year.
We've never increased it
Right.
at all.
Okay. Have we worked on figuring out what our cost is? Because I know every time you pull that truck out of there, you know, it costs money. You know, depreciation, gas, whatever the case may be. You know, I think it's our obligation to help anybody that could possibly die in or somebody's home being burnt down. I don't want to see anybody in that situation, you know, so I think, you know, it's really our obligation. But I think we need to be really looking at the dollar cost, number one. Number two thing, at one time, we had talked, Chief, about, they were talking about building another fire station down there and us manning it, the city of Madeira Beach running it. Is that even still being considered or talked about, or?
It's still being considered. The county is still looking into that. I think they've actually got blueprints drawn up on that, and they are moving forward with that process. It's going to be a multi-jurisdictional, multifunctional station that they're looking to put in up there. It's not just going to be fire EMS. It's going to be.
And that would be us managing it and running it?
That's kind of where we are right now as far as trying to figure out how that's going to shake out. Because it's us and Seminole for fire protection, but then there's the EMS component, which comes from Pinellas County dollars, and that's being funded to Pinellas Suncoast. So there's actually four different agencies providing funding for the one cities.
Okay, because when I read this, I was trying to think of all those things we had talked about in the past. And,
yes, sir.
You know, and if we're sending, you know, 3 firefighters out, you know, or whatever we're sending out,
right.
You know, are we covering their costs? Are we covering their retirement? Are we covering their benefits? Are we covering all these type of things? And I guess that's kind of where we're looking to go. So give us a better idea of the dollar amount.
Right.
And let's say the dollar amount, it comes up to 250,000 again, you know, just for playing numbers. You know, do we have put something in the contract that, you know, it would increase each year based on the cost of living increase or, you know, one of these type of things?
Acquisition of new equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I'm kind of looking at when I read this.
There is a factor built into that.
I saw that, yeah. Is it a good?
Well, that's something Mr. Evans has been looking at. We've been having several conversations about that, how we're going to provide coverage up there. And obviously, you know, our physical responsibility is to this community, you know, but we've been a good neighbor to the Reddingtons for some time now. So, you know, if we can work with them and make it work for us, then obviously that'd be the way that we'd want to pursue that. But, you know, it's all about dollars and cents, I'm sure.
Is anything still going on with the Treasure Island part? So that's another piece of the puzzle we might have to look at, you know?
With the situation with Treasure Island, I think that they've decided to move in a situation where they're going to effectively create a public safety director position and have a deputy police chief and fire chief. But we still stand prepared to assist them.
As we should.
I think that the chief has graciously agreed to just provide them just some of the best practices, some of the, you know, maybe SOPs, some of the things we have in place to get them from point A to point B. And in the event that staffing levels get below what is appropriate, we're certainly going to jump in and help them out. But I think that's the direction that they're going to go with their fire service as of last week or so.
Thank you.
I have one other question, non-related. How's the puppy? How's Clover?
How's Clover?
Clover is doing fantastic. She's making a lot of new friends, obviously, but she's off at training camp. She's off getting her first train. She'll be gone for 2 weeks. And I don't remember exactly where she's at. She's here local, but they take pictures of her every day. But she's learned some manners. She's going to finishing school, if you will. So
There you go.
she's doing very well. We miss her already. She just left yesterday. So
And Chief can provide you, we had a visitor from a national network that was at the firehouse. You can.
absolutely, we had a gentleman call up the station and wanted to do a story and very British accent. And anyway, it was from Animal Planet. And they flew the gentleman here to Madeira Beach and was here all day long, filming Clover and one of our fire guys, but various pictures and a lot of information going back and forth. So hopefully they're supposed to keep us up to date because they're taking all that information back over to London and then they're going to process it. And it should be on Animal Planet here sometime in the next year. So
Nice.
yeah, pretty impressive.
That's awesome. Glad I asked.
How long is Clover going to be gone?
2 weeks. Yeah.
So does she miss you more, or do you guys miss her?
I tell you what, my guys are dragging around there right now. So, you know, they've taken this time to help clean up everything that, you know, she's messed up and make sure everything's clean and proper. So, you know, it's a good time for both of us, I think. So she'll be good, even better when she comes back. So, yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion on this topic? Because I think we're in agreement that we need to get some more data and information and go forward.
Absolutely.
Are we on us now? Are we on us?
Yes. Now, next we have Commissioner comment.
Well, I had a question, because I wasn't here at the budget meeting. I wanted to know if the generator issue has been addressed for City Hall.
The generator issue has not been addressed at City Hall. We've had some conversations with the building official as well as the the engineer here, Al Carrier, about some of the concerns that if we look to put a generator on this particular facility, that we're going to have engineer drawing, architectural drawings and all that, because there's not adequate space to place it adjacent to the facility. So in essence, we'd have to mount it to the roof. So we're also looking at the most opportune location for a generator. We were looking at the rec center to be able to make that accommodations. And Director Pierce's staff is actually working on a grant on the particular generator, and he may be able to provide a better update on that, but that's something that we're looking to see if we can get some funding, because what we were told is that in essence, if you end up applying for the grant, in most cases, you have a good, chance of getting that, and that's to the tune of almost close to $200,000. One of the things that we're going to be doing is looking to acquire some additional, grants, and looking to have some, or not grants, but generators to be able to have a plug-in to where we can actually hook up and get some facilities up and operational. We're looking at our emergency operations plan, because ideally in the best case scenario, we should have not occupied this facility. We should have all been at the fire department versus having City Hall up and operational. So we're looking at our emergency operation plan and determining the most optimal way to be able to provide services to the community. So that's something that you're going to see here. We're going to be presenting that to you, I believe, the first meeting in June, as far as what our plan is, and I can get you more concrete information on the generator and our plan of attack.
So what's the estimated cost of the generator and all the electrical drawings and all that kind of stuff, the extra stuff that you gotta have? What's a ballpark?
I think the last number I saw was almost $215,000 to $245,000. I think that was the last number I saw.
Okay.
Well, now that we're all gathered together here, I do have some comments. There's been articles, as we all know, TV reports, so forth. I've had a lot of people in my area asking me questions as to where we stand. And I can honestly just tell them, I don't know. And I feel like we need to know what's happening. What is our obligation? Do we have an obligation towards the situation at hand? Where is it, the status? what can we say, what can we not say? You know, where are we?
If, at this particular moment, I would probably have to defer to the city attorney to be able to provide a perspective on what the stance for the city is and what is going on in this particular issue. So, Mr. Brooks?
If you're referring to the Commission on Ethics proceedings, those will be handled by the Commission on Ethics, and we don't do anything with those at this point. So we'll see what happens there at the Commission on Ethics. It's a different level of government right now.
Okay.
And that's where the due process hearings will occur.
Okay, so basically that's all we can say then? Just, it's handed over to the Ethics Commission?
Yeah, they can call the Commission on Ethics and obtain public records from there. That's where all those documents are. And we don't do anything with it. That's where the trial or hearing will occur. And that's where the competing witnesses will appear and all that stuff. So that's all handled there, not at our level. Depending on the result, there may be something that happens here afterwards, but nothing at this point.
Are you representing Nancy on this?
No, she has a private attorney. There is coverage for Commission on Ethics complaints through the insurance company that the city has. But I don't know whether Nancy is utilizing that coverage or that attorney. She has a private attorney.
Okay. Just the fact that, you know, Nancy's been gone for a while, and of course her seat's obviously been empty. So now that she's back and people see that she's back, they're going to be asking questions again over that. You know, can she still sit up there?
Yes, she can. She's still there now, and that's all being handled at the Commission on Ethics. They will hold the hearing, not this council.
Okay.
I have two things.
These were acts that I guess that occurred in 2012, the accusations. So 5 years or more ago.
Was there a statute of limitation on something like that?
I think it's 5 years.
Maybe it's over. May I make a comment? I wanted to ask about the Barks and Brew for June the 6th. That's still...
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I had a conversation with the recreation director, and he said that based on the lack of numbers or of breweries that can participate, because I guess there's another event that he's probably going to look to postpone the event. But I'm pretty sure that was something that he was still up in the air about, but he may have, we may have finalized that here, but he was mentioning to me not too long ago, and he may have said that we're effectively going to postpone it just because of the lack of vendors that can participate. And if they do decide to participate, I think it would be a cost to the city. And in the previous times we've had where they've actually contributed the alcohol versus us acquiring it. So if that's in fact the case, then we'll just go ahead and postpone it. But I'll send out an email definitively, but he may have mentioned something to me in passing.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to remind all the citizens, since it's the last workshop, right? Well, we'll have one next week, of course, but we will have one next week, won't we? Yeah, June the 6th.
Yeah, 5th and 6th.
Okay. But to remind the citizens, and I'll be at Johns Pass Park or South Beach, whatever you want to call it, on May the 27th from 11 to 1. And for any citizens who might not want to come to City Hall and air their grievances or make any comments or say something good or something bad, I'll be there. And the city manager will be there with me. So, but none of y'all can come.
I've got a couple things.
And everybody have a happy and safe and healthy Memorial Day.
At the last meeting, you said you would have a cost for us of an audit, to be able to do an audit on a department or whatever. Have you received those costs yet, or those estimates?
I will get that to you. No, I haven't actually reached out to a CPA firm. I can get that for just a single audit, or?
Well, I think the way we talked last time, if we wanted to do Department X, or if we wanted to do multiple departments, whatever the cost would be.
Okay. I will get that, and we'll email that out.
The other thing I've asked for a couple times, still haven't seen it, is that traffic study from FDOT.
FDOT will be here, I believe, if not June 12th to June 26th to address the board. We wanted to have them here tonight, but unfortunately scheduling didn't allow for it, but they are coming to present to the board.
Their study.
Esposito is coming to present the studies, but also FDOT's role in every traffic study that impacts their roadways.
Okay.
Yeah, and at that time, there's going to be a development review as well for development projects, et cetera.
Say it again, please.
There will be a development review, so the planning and zoning director will provide a recap of all the development projects that we have in the hopper and those that are close to being issued permits and those that are under review and those that are actually in some phase of construction.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any more commissioner comments? Last on the agenda is the city manager's report.
Madam Mayor, members of the board, I just wanted to inform you that this will be something that I would just add to any workshop or agenda item that we, or agenda packet that we put out, just for those that download the agenda packet or pick up an agenda packet, so they get a copy of the manager's report. Of course, we send it to folks digitally, but we also wanted to provide them to get it in the agenda packet, so I just wanted to have it noted on the agenda, so there's no comments and remarks on it.
Any discussion from the commission? Any public comment? The meeting is now adjourned at 5:46.